Inheritance of Stillness, a Mannequin's Hours novel, Book 2, written by Alana Sanchez, narrated by Vivian. Copyright 2025 Alana Sanchez. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, edited, copied, altered, printed, shared, unauthorized storage on electronic devices, or distributed without written permission of the author. Chapter 1. A Tuesday. They get married on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays mean anything, but because the registry has the time free and neither of them wants to wait. The room smells faintly of disinfectant and old paper. The carpet is worn thin where people have stood and promised each other things they didn't yet understand. She wears a dress she can move in. That matters more to her than white. More than tradition. More than photographs. When she steps forward, she is aware of being looked at. She always is. But it doesn't press her flat. John is watching her. Not the room. Not the idea of her. Just her. When she says yes, it is steady. Not triumphant. Not afraid. Just real. Afterwards, there is coffee in mismatched cups and a cake someone picked up on the way over. No speeches. No performance. John squeezes her hand as if checking she is still there. She squeezes back, harder than necessary. That night, in their flat, they leave the windows open. The city hums softly, indifferent to what they have done. They are tired in the way that comes from making a decision that settles something rather than unsettles it. She does not think about becoming a mother. She thinks about being touched without stillness. About moving when she wants to. About John's hands, warm and certain, unafraid of her changing shape beneath them. When it happens, she knows. Not as certainty, not as language, but as a shift she recognizes immediately. The way you recognize balance returning after a stumble. Something settles deep and sure inside her, a small internal alignment, like a door closing cleanly. She stills for a moment without meaning to, breath caught low in her chest, and the thought arrives without panic or ceremony. This is it. She does not say anything. She does not need to. Her body has already begun to account for a future it cannot yet measure. She falls asleep with her leg tangled in John's, her body loose, unposed. 2 weeks later, they purchased the combined studio space downstairs and the upstairs unit. It used to be a hardware shop, long and narrow, with a wide front window that lets in too much light. John likes it immediately. Darling does not, at first. The glass feels too honest, too exposed. But then she imagines bodies inside it. Not moving. Not dead either. Caught mid-gesture. Mid-choice. Held, but not erased. Mannequins that don't sell clothes, but moments. A way to preserve a body without taking ownership of it. A way to honor shape without making it obedient. The idea comes slowly, over late nights and half-finished conversations. Custom forms, built from real movement, real weight. People commissioning versions of themselves they are afraid of losing. A shoulder before injury. A posture before time changes it. A body remembered as capable. Darling would design them. John would handle everything else. At first, everything else sounds simple. Invoices. Suppliers. Paint. Tools. Insurance. Delivery schedules. Council forms. A website. A phone line. A front desk they cannot yet afford to staff. Then everything else becomes everything. They argue about paint. About whether the floor should stay rough or be sanded back. John wants the walls bright. Darling wants them quiet. They compromise badly, then laugh about it later. The decisions feel good, mundane, shared, unfinished in the right way. The changes in her body come quietly, and then all at once. Coffee turns on her first. The smell alone is enough to make her turn away, sudden and sharp, despite years of loving it. Food becomes a negotiation. Everything tastes wrong, too heavy, too insistent. She eats plain things because they stay where she puts them. Biscuits. Toast. Small, careful meals that leave her uncomfortably full, as if her body is already learning how to make room by refusing excess. There is a flutter low in her stomach that she cannot quite place. Not pain. Not hunger. Something like movement without direction, like a hand brushing past from the inside. It comes and goes, leaves her unsettled, then oddly calm. John notices her pushing food around her plate. He jokes about stress, about opening a business too fast. She lets him believe it. The test is positive on a Thursday morning. She sits on the edge of the bath, staring at the two thin magenta lines. She takes another test, then another, then another. She lines them along the sink, counting proof instead of time. The instinct comes fast and absolute. Not wonder, not fear, protection. Whatever this is, whatever it asks of her, it will be kept safe. There is no negotiation in it, not even with John, not even with herself. Her hand settles over her stomach, as if it already knows where to stand guard. When she tells him, John goes very still, not frozen, not alarmed, just present. He sits beside her on the floor, back against the bath, and listens as if listening itself is part of the work. Time doesn't rush them. It doesn't slow, either. It simply continues, accommodating, unbothered, making space. They sit there a long while, saying very little, until John laughs quietly and presses his forehead to her shoulder. Well, he says, that explains a few things. She smiles. Not because it is funny, because it is enough. Later, when the city settles and the flat grows quiet, she lies awake with her hand still on her stomach. There is another small flutter, deliberate this time. Not a message, not a demand, just presence. She breathes. The feeling settles with her. Nothing is being rushed. Nothing needs to be. Downstairs, the studio waits. There are paint tins stacked near the door. Timber samples on the floor. A delivery invoice John has forgotten to pay sitting beneath a mug. A supplier email blinking unread on his laptop. He will see it tomorrow. Or he thinks he will. For now, he sleeps beside his wife, one hand resting near hers, both of them unaware that the business has already become too large for two people. And somewhere else in the city, a young man named Ben looks at an advertisement for a part-time studio assistant and does not scroll past. Chapter 2. The applicant. Ben does not need the job. That is the first thing he knows, and the first thing he decides never to say. He sits in a cafe 3 streets away from Darling Atelier with his laptop open and the job advertisement glowing on the screen. Studio assistant required. Part-time to start. Admin, client bookings, supplier coordination, front desk support. Experience with small business preferred. Must be organized. Must be comfortable around mannequins. Ben reads the last line 3 times. Comfortable around mannequins. He almost smiles. Most people would find that strange. He finds it honest. Businesses reveal themselves in the requirements they think are ordinary. His family would hate this job. That is the second thing he knows. They would hate the pay. They would hate the scale. They would hate the word assistant most of all. They would call it a waste of his education. A tantrum dressed up as independence. An embarrassing little rebellion he would outgrow once he remembered what he owed. Ben closes the laptop, then opens it again. His degree sits on his record like a polished piece of evidence. Business management, with the right university name attached. He has worked in offices with glass walls and quiet contempt. He has sat in rooms where men discussed companies like bodies to be rearranged. Reduce waste. Optimize flow. Trim excess. Extract value. He is good at it. That is the problem. Ben comes from money old enough to behave as if it is not money at all, but whether. Something everyone is expected to adjust to. His family do not ask whether he will join the business. They discuss when. They send emails with attachments. They say opportunity when they mean obedience. He wants out. Not dramatically. Not with a suitcase and a speech. He wants ordinary work. Declared work. Paid work. A key that opens only the door it is supposed to open. He wants a job no one in his family can turn into a future. So, he sends the application. He removes half his qualifications first. Then puts one back in. Then removes the surname from the file name and leaves only Ben. When John calls him 2 days later, he sounds tired and careful. You're very qualified for this, John says. Ben looks around the service department his mother keeps insisting is temporary and says, I'm looking for practical work. There is a pause. This is practical, John says. Good. The pay isn't impressive. I saw. Another pause. You still interested? Ben looks at the city through glass he did not choose. Yes, he says. I am. The interview takes place at 10 on a wet morning. Darling Atelier smells like dust, paint, old timber, and something metallic that hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. The studio is half-made. Tools on benches. Curtains still in packaging. A front counter that is not attached to anything. A ladder leaning against the wall at an angle Ben dislikes immediately. Darling stands near the center of the room. She does not come forward straight away. Ben notices this because people from his world always come forward too quickly. They fill space before anyone can question whether they belong in it. Darling does not fill the room. She reads it. Her hands rest loosely at her sides, her attention moving from wall to window to floor to him. Not rude. Not welcoming either. Assessing. John stands a few steps behind her with a clipboard under one arm and tiredness pressed carefully behind his eyes. Ben, he asks. That's right. They shake hands. John's grip is warm, firm, ordinary. Darling does not offer her hand. Ben likes her for that. Not because it is friendly, because it is true. You've worked in business management? John asks. I studied it. And after that? Office work. Operations. Supplier accounts. Scheduling. Why leave? Ben has prepared 6 answers to this question. None of them feel useful once Darling is looking at him. I didn't like what the work turned people into, he says. John blinks. Darling's expression does not change, but something in her attention settles. That's honest. John says slowly. Not entirely, Ben replies. John's mouth twitches despite himself. Darling looks toward the ladder. Would you move that? Ben follows her gaze. The ladder? Yes. He waits a second, making sure it is a request and not a test. Then he moves it. Not far. Just enough that if someone came through the door carrying a box, they would not have to turn sideways. Just enough that the path from front to bench becomes clean. Darling watches him. John watches Darling watching him. Ben returns to his place and says nothing. Darling nods once. John looks down at his clipboard, then at Ben again. The work is messy, John says. It's not a polished role yet. We need someone to answer emails, book appointments, track invoices, handle some ordering. Maybe front desk. Once we open properly. It won't be glamorous. That's fine. We also need discretion. Ben's gaze moves briefly to Darling, then back to John. About the business? About everything, John says. The room quiets. Rain ticks softly against the front window. Darling shifts slightly, one hand moving low over her stomach before dropping again. The gesture is brief. Easy to miss. Ben does not miss it. He also does not look at it for too long. Discretion is fine, he says. Darling speaks then. You didn't touch anything without being asked. Ben turns to her. No. Why? He considers. Because it isn't mine. John's expression changes slightly. Darling's does not. But the room feels as if it has accepted the answer before either of them has. The interview continues, because interviews are supposed to continue. John asks about spreadsheets. Ben answers. John asks about suppliers. Ben answers. John asks if he can deal with difficult clients. Ben thinks of boardrooms, lawyers, cousins with inherited confidence, his father's calm voice saying don't be emotional about assets. Yes, Ben says. I can. Darling asks only one more question. Can you wait? Ben looks at her. It is not the question he expects. Wait. When people need time, she says. Can you wait without pushing them? John glances at her, concerned and fond and confused all at once. Ben thinks of every room where silence has been treated as weakness. Every family dinner where hesitation has been punished by someone else deciding for him. Yes, he says quietly. I can wait. Darling nods. That is the interview. John offers him 2 trial shifts to start. Ben accepts before the amount of pay is repeated. John notices that, but does not comment. Darling walks him to the door. The rain has eased by then. The street is wet and gray and ordinary. Ben pauses at the threshold, looking once more at the studio behind her. The long room. The exposed floor. The unfinished counter. The wide front window letting in too much light. A bad business setup, technically. Too many vulnerabilities. Too much overhead too early. No proper workflow. No cash buffer visible. No staff structure. No system. And yet, the room feels steadier than any office Ben has ever worked in. Darling says, you can start Monday. Ben nods. I'll be here. She closes the door after him. The click is soft. A boundary, not a dismissal. Ben stands on the wet pavement for a moment, breathing air that does not belong to his family. Then he takes out his phone and declines 3 missed calls. Monday will do. Chapter 3. Pattern Management. Ben starts by fixing the things no one wants to admit are broken. Not loudly. Not officially. Not in a way that makes John feel judged. He finds the unpaid supplier invoice beneath a mug and pays it before the late fee applies. He builds a bookings calendar that does not allow clients to arrive at the same time as deliveries. He sorts the purchase receipts into folders, labels the folders, then relabels them after realizing John will never use the first system. He moves the front desk 6 inches to the left. No one notices. Everyone stops bumping into it. That is the sort of thing Ben understands best. Invisible correction. The studio does not need ambition. It has enough of that in Darling's hands. It needs structure. Quiet, flexible structure that does not make a cage of itself. John works hard, but John is trying to be husband, business owner, protector, renovator, and future father all at once. He forgets small things because he is holding large ones. He answers calls while carrying timber. He writes notes on the backs of envelopes and then loses the envelopes. He tells Darling everything is under control in the voice of a man who has decided control is an act of love. Ben recognizes the shape of it immediately. Not incompetence. Load. So Ben takes what he can. Supplier accounts first. Then client deposits. Then the insurance renewal John keeps meaning to check. Then the website inquiry form that has been sending half the emails into a folder marked promotions. After 2 weeks, John says, "You're making us look more organized than we are." Ben replies, "That's most businesses." John laughs. Darling does not laugh, but she smiles faintly from the workbench. Her body is changing now. Not obviously, not to a stranger, but Ben is not a stranger to pattern. He notices what changes by noticing what repeats differently. She eats watermelon at 11. Every day. She stops mid-morning. Not for long. Less than a minute. Hands still. Breath slow. Eyes open, but turned inward. At first, Ben assumes nausea. Pregnancy makes people rearrange themselves around invisible demands. He does not interfere. Then he notices the room rearranges too. The first time, a client arrives during one of Darling's pauses and the studio goes wrong. Not dramatically. No one screams. Nothing breaks. But the room misaligns. The client speaks too loudly. John drops a receipt. A delivery driver knocks twice instead of once, and opens the door before being invited. Darling moves again afterwards, but she looks more tired than she did before. Ben says nothing. The next day, he shifts the delivery window 15 minutes later. The pause comes. No one interrupts. Darling moves again easily. The room holds. Ben files the information away. By the end of the 3rd week, he has stopped scheduling anything important at mid-morning, midday, or late afternoon. He does not tell John. Not because he is hiding it, because he does not yet know what it is. He only knows it works. The business begins to breathe. Invoices go out on time. Deposits arrive before materials are ordered. Clients receive confirmation emails that sound calm and professional. Suppliers stop ringing John directly and ring Ben instead. John notices that last part first. "Why does everyone suddenly like us?" he asks one afternoon, standing in the office doorway with sawdust on his sleeve. "They don't," Ben says, not looking up from the spreadsheet. "They like being paid on time." John considers this. Fair. Darling is at the central bench, one hand resting lightly against a mannequin's shoulder. She stills. Ben's fingers pause above the keyboard. John keeps talking. "So, if we order the casting resin before Friday." Ben closes the laptop softly. John stops. "What?" Ben glances toward Darling. John follows his gaze. Darling stands perfectly still. Balanced. Present. Not gone. Not exactly. The studio quiets around her. Ben lowers his voice. "Give her a moment." John's face shifts. Concern first. Then confusion. Then the gentler explanation he has been using without knowing he has chosen it. "She does that," John says softly. "When she's focused." Ben does not argue. The baby moves beneath Darling's hand. Ben cannot see it, of course. Not properly. But he sees her body register something. The smallest internal answer. The mannequin beneath her palm seems to hold better after that. Not move. Not change. Hold. Ben looks away. There are things a person should not name too early, especially in someone else's life. After Darling moves again, John releases a breath he probably does not realize he was holding. You alright? He asks. Darling nods. Yes. She sounds clear. Not tired. Clear. Ben opens the laptop again. The studio resumes. That evening, after closing, Ben stays late to finish the accounts. He tells himself he is doing it because the quarterly tax folder is a disaster and because John uses the word roughly in financial contexts far too often. That is partly true. The other part is upstairs. The baby is not born yet. Not named yet. Not princess yet. Only a presence in Darling's body. A quiet, deliberate thing that seems to make the whole building wait properly. Ben does not believe in destiny. He believes in pressure, leverage, timing, systems, and human behavior. He believes people become predictable when they want something badly enough. His family wants obedience. John wants safety. Darling wants movement. And the baby. Ben pauses, pen hovering over the ledger. He does not know what the baby wants. Not yet. But when Darling stills, the room behaves as if the answer matters. So Ben builds the business around that. Not because he understands. Because he is useful when he does not. He adjusts the roster that does not yet exist. Blocks out the quiet windows. Changes the supplier notes. Adds reminders for John. Moves consultations away from the center bench. He creates a cash flow sheet with 3 versions: likely, cautious, and disaster. Then he deletes the word disaster and renames it winter. It feels kinder. At 9:30, John comes downstairs. You're still here? Ben saves the file. Almost done. John leans against the office doorframe. You don't have to keep doing extra hours. I know. We can't pay you like some corporate job. I know. John studies him for a moment. You sure this is what you want? Ben thinks of his family home. The long dining table. The polished floors. His father's office. His mother saying your grandfather built this for you, as if inheritance is love instead of gravity. Then he looks through the office glass at Darling's studio. Unfinished. Strange. Held together by invoices, instinct, and one woman's refusal to become still again. Yes, Ben says. I'm sure. John nods slowly, not convinced, but accepting. That is enough. After John goes back upstairs, Ben switches off the office light and walks through the studio before locking up. He checks the front door, the back door, the windows, the staircase. He does it because a good assistant checks the building. That is what he tells himself. Years later, he will understand that something in him had already started answering to Princess before she had a name. But not yet. For now, he is only Ben. Overqualified, underpaid, running from one family and accidentally walking into another. He locks the door. The studio settles behind him. And upstairs, unseen, the baby moves. Chapter 4. John starts noticing pressure the way he notices weather, not because it is dramatic, but because it changes how everything moves. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small, reasonable shapes. Emails phrased as inquiries. Phone calls that open with compliments. A council notice pinned to the studio's front window that looks more informative than intrusive. He handles each one calmly. This is what he is good at. The first email is about air rights. The second mentions redevelopment potential. The third uses the word optimization so many times it stops meaning anything at all. John replies politely and non-committally, the way you do when someone is trying to hurry you into agreement by pretending they aren't. He doesn't mention any of it to Darling. Not because he is hiding it, because it is his job to absorb it. From Darling's side, the studio continues to work. From John's side, the world begins to lean. Ben notices the lean before anyone names it. Of course he does. Ben notices everything that threatens a system. He does not ask John about the emails. He does not ask why the man from council keeps using language that sounds like a favor and reads like a warning. He simply prints what needs printing, saves what needs saving, and begins a folder labeled property, external pressure. John sees it once on the office computer. He almost asks. Then he doesn't. There is something quietly useful about Ben's refusal to panic. The doctor's appointment is booked as routine. Darling doesn't argue. She never does about things that make sense on paper. The waiting room smells faintly of disinfectant and citrus cleaner. The chairs are too close together. John sits with his knee angled protectively toward her without thinking about it. Darling eats watermelon from a container while they wait. No one comments. No one asks. The doctor is pleasant. Efficient. She asks questions that feel standard and makes notes that don't alarm John at all. How far along are we now? She asks, scanning the file. Darling gives the date. The doctor pauses. Looks again. She says, not unkindly. All right. John straightens slightly. Is that a problem? No. The doctor says easily. Just slower progression than average. Nothing concerning. Some pregnancies take their time. Darling feels the baby shift. Not sharply. Not defensively. Present. Evaluating. The doctor continues. Blood pressure fine. Heartbeat steady. Everything where it should be, even if the calendar doesn't quite agree. I'd like to keep an eye on things, the doctor says. More frequent check-ins. Just to make sure we're staying on track. John nods. Of course. Darling nods too. They leave with another appointment scheduled and no sense of urgency. John files it away under monitoring, not risk. Outside. Darling stands still on the footpath for a moment, one hand resting low on her stomach. John waits. He has always waited when she needs it. But this time, he notices the waiting differently. Her stillness is not hesitation. It is not tiredness. It has shape. Her breathing slows. Her shoulders settle. Her body does not sag or drift or lose itself. It simply stops, balanced exactly where it is, as if something inside her has asked the whole world for a moment, and she has granted it. The street continues around them. Cars pass. A woman pushes a pram past the clinic entrance. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs too loudly into a phone. Darling remains still. John feels the old fear lift its head. Not fully. Not enough to become a thought. Just enough that his hand twitches at his side. Then Darling breathes in, slow and deliberate, and moves again. All right, he asks. Yes, she says. She sounds clear. Not distant. Not trapped. Clear. So John lets the fear lower itself again. Back at the studio, the council notice is gone. Ben has taken it down and filed it without comment. He has adjusted the front display slightly, opening the space so it feels less invitational. The mannequins are positioned closer together than they were yesterday, not crowded, just definitive. John notices. He doesn't ask. Over the next week, pressure increases. A follow-up call from the council. A request for an inspection window. An investor who wants to have a look at the space upstairs. John declines each one with a calm that surprises even him. The unit isn't part of the studio, he says repeatedly. The studio meets all current requirements. We're not expanding. He starts keeping records. Dates. Names. Language used. Ben keeps better ones. John knows this because every time he looks for something, Ben has already scanned it, dated it, and stored it in 3 places. You don't have to do all that, John says one afternoon. Ben does not look up from the computer. Yes, I do. John pauses. Ben seems to realize what he has said a second after he says it. He clears his throat. I mean, it's useful, he adds. John studies the back of his head for a moment. Ben's posture is too controlled for someone his age. Too trained. Too careful. John has noticed this more and more. The way Ben talks to difficult people on the phone without becoming smaller. The way he recognizes threat in polite language. The way he never seems impressed by men who expect to be obeyed. There is history there. John doesn't ask. Everyone in the studio has history. At home, Darling eats watermelon and rests when her body asks her to. She stills without explanation, and John begins to notice the timing. Mid-morning, midday, late afternoon. Not every pause is exact. Not every day is identical. But the pattern is there. Once John sees it, he cannot stop seeing it. He sees Darling stop with one hand on the workbench, eyes open, attention turned inward. He sees the room soften around her. He sees Ben lower his voice before Darling has even stopped moving. He sees clients redirected, deliveries held at the door. The phone answered on the first ring so it does not disturb the studio. He sees all of it and tells himself it is ordinary. Pregnancy, fatigue, focus, adaptation, Kind explanations. Gentle explanations. Explanations that do not require him to remember darling frozen in herself, unreachable and aware. Her body made into something that could be looked at but not answered. One afternoon, the phone rings during the midday pause. Darling is at the central bench, both hands resting on the edge of it. Still. Not slumped. Not gone. Perfectly balanced. The sound cuts through the studio too sharply. John reaches for the phone, then appears in the office doorway so quickly it startles him. Don't, Ben says. John freezes with his hand half raised. The phone rings again. Darling does not move. Ben's face changes as if the word has escaped before he could stop it. John looks at him slowly. Don't what? Ben swallows. Don't disturb her. The phone rings a third time. John picks it up and silences it without answering. The studio seems to settle. Darling remains still. John's voice drops. What did you say? Ben glances toward Darling, then back to John. She does this, he says. John feels something inside him tighten. What? Ben shifts his weight, uncomfortable now, but unable to retreat from what he has already started. She stops, he says quietly. 3 times a day. John says nothing. Ben keeps going because silence, apparently, makes him worse. Not randomly. Mid-morning, usually. Then around midday. Then late afternoon. If she gets interrupted, the room goes wrong. John stares at him. The room goes wrong, he repeats. Ben flushes faintly. That sounds stupid. No, John says. The word comes out too quickly. Ben looks at him properly then. John turns toward Darling. She is still exactly where she was. Breathing. Present. Her hand shifts a fraction lower, toward her stomach. Not enough to become movement. Enough to become meaning. The baby. John's throat tightens. Ben speaks more softly now. I don't think it's dangerous, he says. I think it's... I don't know. Regulation, maybe. Pattern. The baby responds to it. Or she responds to the baby. I haven't worked that out. John's gaze snaps back to him. How long have you known? Ben's expression closes slightly. Known, he asks. John hears the mistake in the word. Ben does not know. Not the way John knows. Not the curse. Not the store. Not the years. Not the horror of stillness as punishment. Ben only knows outcomes. John forces himself to breathe. How long have you noticed? He asks instead. Ben answers carefully. A few weeks. Weeks. The guilt arrives cleanly. I should have seen it. Then the answer follows, just as cleanly. You did. You chose the kinder explanation. Darling exhales. The stillness releases. Not dramatically. Not like waking. More like a held note resolving. She lifts her head and looks at them. John knows immediately that she heard enough. Maybe all of it. Ben goes very still. Though not in Darling's way. In the way of someone realizing he may have overstepped. Darling looks first at John. Then at Ben. No one speaks. Finally, she says, he's right. John closes his eyes for half a second. When he opens them, Darling is watching him gently. Not apologetically. Gently. That is worse. I thought it was focus, John says. It is, Darling replies. Ben looks between them, confused by the shape of the conversation. Darling places one palm against the workbench. The mannequin beside her seems to hold itself more firmly, though John knows better than to say so out loud. It isn't like before, she says. John hears the before and feels it open beneath the room. Ben hears it too, though he does not understand the depth of it. Darling. John says quietly. I'm not trapped, she says. He believes her. He does. That is the frightening part, because she is telling the truth. This is not the old stillness. Not the violent, absolute removal of her from herself. This is softer. Chosen, or at least allowed. A pause with purpose. A condition the body has made with whatever is growing inside it. Still. The word lives in him like a bruise. Stillness. Ben clears his throat. I didn't mean to interfere. Darling looks at him. You didn't. I moved the schedule around it. I know. Ben blinks. John looks at Darling. You knew. Darling's mouth softens. The studio got easier. Ben looks down at the floor, embarrassed and oddly relieved. It seemed practical, he mutters. Darling smiles faintly. It is. The moment should feel absurd. A pregnant woman, her husband, and their overqualified studio assistant standing among mannequins, calmly discussing the management of supernatural pauses without naming them properly. Instead, it feels like the first honest thing the day has done. John rubs one hand over his face. "All right," he says. Darling watches him. "All right." He nods once. "If it happens 3 times a day, then we protect those times." Ben looks up immediately. "I already blocked them in the calendar." John almost laughs. Of course he has. Darling's smile deepens slightly. John looks at Ben. "Then we make it official." Ben nods, too serious. "No bookings. No deliveries. No calls unless urgent. No clients in the center space." "And if someone turns up anyway?" John asks. Ben's expression changes. Not hard exactly. Precise. They wait. John holds his gaze for a moment, then nods. Outside, a bus hisses at the curb. The city continues, unaware of the small agreement being made inside the studio. Darling rests one hand low on her stomach. The baby shifts. Slow. Deliberate. Present. John sees her feel it. Sees the way her body answers, not by vanishing, not by freezing, but by holding. This time, he does not call it focus. He does not call it pregnancy. He does not call it anything soft enough to make himself comfortable. He only steps closer. Not touching. Guarding space rather than claiming it. "Tell me next time," he says quietly. Darling looks at him. "I will." Ben makes a faint sound from the office doorway. John turns. "What?" Ben hesitates. Then says, "She doesn't always know before it happens." The sentence lands carefully. Useful. Not accusatory. Darling lowers her gaze for a moment, then nods. "Not always," she admits. John absorbs that. The old guilt tries to rise again. He does not feed it. Guilt has never protected anyone on its own. Systems do. So does attention. So does love. When it learns to become practical. "Then we watch with her," John says. Ben nods once. Darling says nothing. But the studio settles around them, as if some structural point has finally been reinforced. That evening, as they sit upstairs with the windows open, John brings it up again carefully. "The doctor wants to see us more often," he says. "Just to track things." Darling sits on the couch with her feet tucked beneath her, a bowl of watermelon balanced on her lap. "That's fine," she says. "You're not worried?" "No." He studies her for a moment. She is calm, clear, present in her body in a way she hasn't been since before everything else. "You're handling this well," he says. Darling smiles faintly. "So are you." He laughs quietly. "I missed it." Her expression softens. "You were looking at other things." "That isn't an excuse." "No," she says. "It's a reason." He looks away, jaw tightening. Below them, the studio is quiet. Ben is still downstairs, finishing something he will claim is minor and necessary. John can hear the faint rhythm of the keyboard through the floorboards. "He noticed," John says. "Yes." "He protected it." "Yes." John exhales slowly. There is no jealousy in it. No resentment. Only the uncomfortable humility of realizing someone else saw a danger before he did and chose to help instead of use it. "We need him," John says. Darling eats another piece of watermelon, considering. Then she nods. "Yes," she says. "We do." The baby shifts beneath her hand. John sees the movement this time. He does not look away. Whatever they cured before, whatever they survived, it taught him one thing very clearly. If pressure builds, you do not wait for it to break something. You absorb it. You redirect it. You build around the vulnerable point until the vulnerable point becomes held. Downstairs, Ben finishes his end-of-day checks. CCTV angles correct. Walkways clear. The staircase unobstructed. The 3 quiet windows marked in the calendar, without explanation. Everything looks normal, which, John is beginning to understand, is the point. Chapter 5. Ownership changes the shape of pressure. John understands this instinctively. People speak differently when they realize there is no lease to exploit, no renewal to threaten, no landlord to flatter into pressure on their behalf. Interest sharpens. Politeness thins. Questions start to arrive that assume inevitability. "You're sitting on a valuable footprint," the man on the phone says. "Air rights alone." We're not selling. John replies evenly. There is a pause. Then a laugh. Like this is a misunderstanding that can be corrected with persistence. Everyone sells eventually. John ends the call without raising his voice. Downstairs, the studio holds its shape. Darling works at the central bench, hands steady, movements economical. The mannequins around her are closer together than they were a month ago. Not crowded, not posed. Simply aligned. She hadn't planned it that way. She has stopped planning placement altogether. Her hands move, adjust, withdraw. The forms respond by holding what she gives them. She doesn't question it. Not yet. Her body feels heavier some days, but not in the way people mean when they talk about pregnancy. It is not weight exactly. It is occupancy. A second presence inside her that seems less interested in time than in conditions. The baby grows when the room allows it. Darling knows this now in the body, before she knows it in language. She feels the baby shift as she stills, a low, deliberate presence. Not a kick. Not a flutter. A check. Her hand settles on her stomach without thought. The mannequins nearest her feel denser somehow, more anchored. She breathes, slow and even, and the room seems to breathe with her. John notices the pause from the office doorway. He stops speaking before the sentence leaves him. Ben has already stopped typing. No one moves toward Darling. No one calls her name. No one asks if she is all right. That is new. That is the system now. Mid-morning. Midday. Late afternoon. 3 quiet windows marked in Ben's calendar, without description. No bookings. No deliveries. No new clients placed near the central bench. No phone calls forwarded unless unavoidable. At first, John had wanted to call them something. Rest periods. Quiet time. Darling's windows. Ben had looked uncomfortable with all of them. They don't need a name, Ben had said. John had understood immediately. Naming things made them easier to explain. Explanation made them easier to challenge. So they do not name them. They simply protect them. Darling exhales. The stillness releases cleanly. She lifts her hand from her stomach and resumes work as if no interruption has occurred. John feels his own body release half a second later. Ben resumes typing. The studio goes on. That, John is learning, is the miracle of it. Not drama. Continuation. Upstairs, the unit smells faintly of watermelon and clean linen. Darling eats standing at the kitchen counter, one piece at a time. The baby settles as she eats, timing itself to her pace. She stills between pieces without meaning to, each pause precise. She leans her forehead briefly against the fridge door. Below her feet, the mannequins hold. She knows that now. Not consciously. Not narratively. In her body. When she goes back downstairs, she passes between 2 mannequins and feels something familiar pass back. Not warmth, not movement. Recognition. She exhales. John watches her from the office doorway. He has stopped thinking about stillness as a symptom. He has started thinking about it the way he thinks about doors and locks and sightlines. Necessary pauses. Structural points. Things that must be respected if the whole building is going to hold. Ben, unfortunately, is much better at structure than either of them. John knows this because the business has stopped bleeding money and no one has admitted it was bleeding in the first place. Invoices go out before clients can forget they owe them. Deposits arrive before materials are ordered. Suppliers who used to speak to John as if he were a man building a hobby now speak to Ben as if there is a contract under every word. Ben has renegotiated 2 payment terms, rejected a 3rd supplier entirely, and built a cash flow sheet John pretends not to understand because understanding it makes him feel slightly ill. You made a winter column, John says one afternoon. Ben glances up from the office desk. Yes. Why is it called winter? Because you objected to disaster. I didn't object. I asked why we needed a disaster column. You objected. John looks at the spreadsheet again. Winter is worse than he thought. Still survivable. That is the part Ben does not say aloud. John sees it anyway. You've done this before, John says. Ben's fingers still on the keyboard. Spreadsheets. Businesses. Ben looks back at the screen. Enough. It is not an answer. It is also not a lie. John has learned not to push Ben the same way he has learned not to rush Darling. Ben will give what he decides is relevant. Nothing more. There is a guardedness to him that does not feel secretive so much as trained. Some people hide things because they are ashamed. Ben hides things because he has learned information can become a leash. John recognizes that well enough to leave it alone. The doctor's follow-up appointment is shorter than the first. Again, nothing is wrong. Again, nothing is rushed. We'll keep monitoring, the doctor says. Some pregnancies don't follow the average curve. John nods. We're in no hurry. Darling stills briefly in the chair, then shifts deliberately. The baby remains calm. The doctor does not notice the stillness. Or if she does, she files it under tiredness. Pregnancy. Mood. The generous blindness of people with clipboards. Outside, John says, if they push for intervention, they won't. Darling says quietly. He studies her. How do you know? She considers. Because everything is working. He accepts that. Not because it makes medical sense. Because he has seen the room answer her. Back at the studio, Ben has already adjusted the afternoon schedule. The mannequins are arranged closer to the back wall today, subtly narrowing the space near the staircase. The CCTV feed shows clean sightlines, no blind spots. Ben does not like the developer. He has not met him yet, but the language in the emails tells him enough. Ownership language. Presumptive access. The assumption that space exists to be claimed if someone with money says the right words long enough. Ben knows that language too well. He reads the newest email twice, then saves it to the property folder. The subject line says, friendly follow-up. The body says something else entirely. John appears beside him. Bad. Ben hesitates. Then turns the screen slightly. John reads in silence. The email is polite, professional, almost warm. It mentions safety obligations, neighborhood improvement, commercial opportunity, and the importance of cooperation. By the third paragraph, John's face has gone still. They're trying to make refusal look unreasonable, Ben says. John exhales slowly. Yes. I'd respond in writing only from now on. I was going to. I drafted something. John looks at him. Ben's ears go faintly pink. I didn't send it. John reads the draft. It is clean, firm, unemotional. Every sentence closes a door without slamming it. It is better than what John would have written. That irritates him for half a second, then relieves him for longer. You sound like a lawyer, John says. Ben's face closes. Not a lawyer. No. John says carefully. Just useful. Ben accepts that with a nod. The late afternoon stillness arrives while they are both in the office. Darling stands near the mannequins, one hand resting against a shoulder, head slightly bowed. John sees it first this time. That matters to him. He steps out of the office without speaking and moves toward the front door, positioning himself between Darling and the street. Ben dims the light near the central display by a fraction. The room settles. Nothing interrupts. Nothing presses in. The baby stills with her, not fading, not withdrawing. Focusing. The mannequins respond in degrees too small to measure. Balance tightens. The room clears. For the first time, Darling understands what she has been doing. Not creating copies. Distributing presence. She has not been placing mannequins. She has been teaching them how to hold space when she cannot move. Her hand rests on her stomach. The baby shifts, slow and certain. Yes, she murmurs. I know. John hears her. So does Ben. Neither of them asks. Some answers are not improved by being dragged into language too soon. That evening, after Ben leaves and the studio is locked, Darling stands among the mannequins a little longer than usual. The room feels less like a shop now. Less like a studio, even. More like a body learning where its bones are. John watches from the staircase. You all right? He asks. Darling looks at the mannequins before she answers. Yes. He comes closer. You sure? Her mouth softens. I'm not afraid of it. He knows what it means. The stillness. The curse. The thing that did not end when they thought it had. John takes that in, and something inside him aches. I am, he says. Darling turns to him fully. Not surprised. Not wounded. Only present. I know. He wants to say more. That he should have noticed sooner. That he should have understood the difference between focus and stillness. That some part of him had wanted so badly for the curse to be over that he had mistaken his wanting for truth. But she already knows all of that. So he says the useful thing instead. We'll keep the windows protected. Yes. And the doctor appointments. Yes. And Ben keeps handling the business. Darling's eyebrows lift slightly. John sighs. Don't make me say it. She smiles. That we need him? I said it yesterday. You did. I can say it again if necessary. It's necessary. John looks toward the office, where Ben has left the desk painfully tidy, every folder labeled, every cable arranged as if chaos might enter through a loose cord. We need him, John says. Darling's smile fades into something gentler. Yes, she says. We do. Downstairs, the studio waits. The mannequins stand. The baby grows only when the room allows it. And for the first time since the beginning, Darling is certain of something without fear. The curse did not end. It learned where to live. Chapter 6. Ben starts the morning the same way he always does. Lights first. Walkway second. Sight lines third. The studio smells faintly of clean resin and dust. Nothing sharp. Nothing disturbed. The building holds itself the way it should. Balanced. Quiet-owned. He checks the CCTV feed before opening the ledger. The angles are exactly as he set them. The staircase is visible from 3 points. No blind spots. No ambiguity that matters. He does not linger on the footage. There is nothing wrong with it yet. That is the phrase he has learned not to say aloud. Yet. Ben has already archived 3 emails by the time the front door is unlocked. The language has shifted overnight. Less inquiry, more assumption. Access. Inspection window. Safety concerns. He flags them and moves on. Pressure that announces itself is rarely the dangerous kind. The dangerous kind arrives smiling. John comes down at 8:30 carrying a folder under one arm and 2 mugs of tea in the other hand. He gives one to Ben without asking whether Ben wants it. Ben accepts it because refusing would make the moment stranger than the tea deserves. Morning, John says. Morning. John sets the folder on the desk. Ownership documents. Compliance certificates. Council correspondence. Printed copies of things Ben has already scanned twice. You brought paper, Ben says. You like paper. I like records. You like paper records. Ben does not argue because unfortunately this is true. John leans against the desk, watching him over the rim of his mug. You slept? Ben looks at the screen. Enough. That means no. It means enough. John lets it go. The studio opens on time. Darling is already there, standing among the mannequins near the center bench. She is not working yet. She is waiting, not idly, not impatiently. Balanced. Present. Her hand rests low on her stomach. John notices the stillness coming before it fully arrives. Ben sees John notice. That changes something in the room. Not enough for anyone else to name. Enough for Ben. John shifts his weight, subtly blocking the path from the front door to the center bench. Ben lowers the office phone volume and moves one appointment reminder 15 minutes later. Neither of them speaks. Darling stills. The room holds. First window. Ben marks it in his head even though the calendar already knows. There is a strange comfort in routine, even when the routine is impossible. Especially then. Later, when the studio is quiet and Darling is upstairs eating watermelon, John closes the office door halfway. Ben does not like that. Half-closed doors usually mean conversations people expect him to endure. John sits in the spare chair. That is worse. You don't have to make this formal, Ben says. John looks faintly amused. I haven't said anything. You closed the door halfway. I did. That's formal. John glances at the door as if considering this. Then he leaves it exactly as it is. Ben sighs. John rests his forearms on his knees. I want to talk about the windows. Ben's posture settles. Work, then. Good. All right. If Darling doesn't always know before they happen, we need coverage. We have coverage. We have your coverage. Ben says nothing. John continues. That isn't the same thing. Ben does not immediately answer because the obvious response is rude. John hears it anyway. I know, he says. You're better at it. Ben looks at him then. John's expression is level. No resentment. No pride trying to dress itself as authority. Just fact. Ben has worked around men who would rather ruin an entire company than admit someone junior saw the structural problem first. John is not like that. John dislikes being late to a truth, but He does not punish the person who arrived before him. That is rarer than it should be. Ben reaches for the notebook beside the keyboard. We need a front-of-house rule, he says. John's mouth twitches. Of course we do. No clients beyond the front display 5 minutes before or after a window. Make it 10. Ben writes that down. No deliveries between 11:30 and 12:30. Good. No phone transfers to Darling directly. She doesn't answer the phone anyway. Still a rule. John nods. Ben writes. No one goes upstairs without you or Darling physically opening the stairwell. John's gaze sharpens. That wasn't about the windows. No, Ben says. But it belongs in the same protocol. John studies him. Ben keeps his eyes on the page. He knows exactly what John is seeing. Too much readiness. Too much familiarity with doors, access, pressure, leverage. Too much understanding of how polite people get inside places they have not been invited. What did your last job involve? John asks. Ben's pen stops. Operations. That's vague. Intentionally. John accepts that, though not comfortably. Were people trying to get into buildings? Ben almost laughs. Not because it is funny, because it is such a small way to describe what people like his family do. They were trying to get into everything, he says. John hears enough in that to stop asking. The office quiets. Outside, Darling's footsteps move across the ceiling. Slow. Measured. The floorboards creak once above them, then settle. Ben looks up automatically. So does John. Neither of them comments. John's voice is quieter when he speaks again. You're good at this. Ben looks back at the notebook. This. Seeing pressure. Ben's jaw tightens. I was raised around people who called pressure opportunity. John says nothing. Ben wishes immediately that he had said less. The words sit in the office between them. Too polished to be accidental. Raised around. Not worked with. Not studied under. Raised around. John's expression changes only slightly. He does not pounce on it. For that, Ben is grateful in a way he does not intend to show. Then you'll recognize this kind, John says, tapping the folder. Ben exhales. Yes. Good. It isn't good. No, John says. But it's useful. Ben looks at him. The word lands differently than it did yesterday. Useful. Not owned. Not exploited. Not claimed. Useful, as in needed. He looks away first. By midday, the second window approaches. Darling comes down from the unit with a bowl of watermelon in one hand and a frown on her face. John sees the frown immediately. What? Nothing. Ben looks up from the desk. John says, that means something. Darling gives him a look. The look is married and tired and affectionate enough that Ben suddenly becomes very interested in the keyboard. Darling sets the bowl on the workbench. I felt crowded upstairs, she says. John's body tightens. Crowded how? Not by people. Ben stops pretending to type. Darling looks toward the mannequins. They are arranged in their usual positions, but not exactly as they were when Ben opened. Two near the back wall appear closer together. One near the staircase has angled by a fraction. Ben knows he did not move them. John knows he did not move them. Darling knows neither of them did. The studio quiets around the knowledge. Darling touches the edge of the bench. The baby wanted down here, she says. John's face does something painful. Ben looks away, not because he is embarrassed, but because the moment feels private and also not private at all. The whole building seems to be listening. Darling stills. Second window. This one is deeper. Ben feels it before he understands he feels it. The air tightens, not dangerously, but completely. Sound thins. The traffic outside becomes distant. The mannequins seem less like objects and more like punctuation marks in a sentence the room is still writing. John moves closer to Darling, then stops himself before touching her. Good, Ben thinks. Then realizes he has thought it like instruction. John does not touch. He stands near enough to guard. Far enough not to interfere. Darling's breathing slows. Her hand settles low over the baby. The room answers. Ben has seen boardrooms go silent when powerful men enter. He has seen dining rooms change temperature because his father cleared his throat. He has seen people mistake fear for respect because fear is easier to organize. This is not that. This stillness does not demand obedience. It asks for conditions. Space. Quiet. Witness. It feels, impossibly, like work. Then Darling breathes in. The moment releases. Ben's hand aches. He looks down and realizes he has been gripping the pen hard enough to leave a mark in his palm. John notices. Ben closes his hand before John can say anything. Darling resumes eating watermelon as if the room has not just rearranged its own laws around her. John lets out a slow breath. Better? He asks. Darling nods. The baby? John asks. Another nod. Good. Ben writes nothing down. Some records are safer in muscle memory. The afternoon brings another council call. Ben answers it. John listens from the office doorway. The man on the phone is pleasant. Smooth. He asks about access. He mentions a concern raised anonymously. He suggests that cooperation now may prevent inconvenience later. Ben lets him speak. That is usually best with men who think speech is ownership. Let them build the shape of themselves out loud. When the man finishes, Ben says, "Please put the request in writing, including the statutory basis for entry and the specific area requiring inspection." There is a pause. "It's more informal than that," the man says. "Then our response is informal too," Ben replies. "No." John's eyebrows lift. The man laughs faintly. "I'm not sure you understand." "I do," Ben says. Another pause. This one less pleasant. "And who am I speaking with?" "Ben." "Ben who?" Ben looks at the phone. For a second, the old answer nearly comes. The surname that opens doors. The one people recognize in certain rooms. The one his family still expects him to use like a key and a chain. He does not give it. "Ben from Darling Atelier," he says. John looks at him. Ben keeps his eyes forward. The man on the phone clears his throat. "I'll email." "Please do." Ben ends the call. The office is silent. John says, "That was satisfying." Ben exhales through his nose. "It won't stop them." "No. It might slow them." "That's enough for today." Ben saves a call note into the property folder. Date. Time. Caller. Language used. No statutory basis provided. Informal access refused. John watches him type. "You know," John says, "for someone who claims to be just an assistant." "I don't claim that." John pauses. Ben looks up. "I am an assistant," Ben says. "There's no just." John's expression softens in a way Ben does not know what to do with. "No," John says. "There isn't." The late afternoon window arrives under a sky gone gray with rain. Darling stands near the staircase this time. That makes John nervous. Ben too. Neither of them says so. The mannequins closest to the stairs seem more alert than the others. Maggie stands nearest the base, calm and neutral, her posture almost too balanced to be decorative. Ben checks the camera feed. Maggie is exactly where she appears to be. Still. Visible. Contained. Darling places her palm against Maggie's shoulder. Consciously. Deliberately. The stillness there is familiar now. Not absence. Capacity. John sees it. Ben sees John see it. The late afternoon pause settles through the studio. Third window. This one holds longer. Darling's eyes remain open. Her breathing slows. The baby stills with her. Maggie does not move, but something about the mannequin's presence becomes more definite. The space near the staircase feels held in place, as if the room has decided nothing will pass there without being noticed. Ben's skin prickles. He checks the camera again. Nothing. Of course nothing. The feed shows only what the feed is allowed to show. Darling releases the pause slowly. When she moves again, she keeps her hand on Maggie's shoulder for another moment. "Thank you," she says softly. John goes very still. Ben does not breathe. Maggie gives no answer. Not visibly, but the building settles around them. Darling turns back to John and Ben. Her face is calm, clear, almost peaceful. "It's not like before," she says. John's voice is low. "I know." This time, he sounds as if he means it. Ben hears the before again. That word with the floor under it missing. He does not ask. Darling looks at him then. "You don't have to understand it all," she says. Ben swallows. "I wasn't going to ask. I know." Her gaze is too gentle. It makes him uncomfortable. "I just need to know what helps," Ben says. Darling nods. "That helps." She means the schedules, the quiet, the refusal to interrupt, the records. the doors. The way he has built structure without making it a cage. Ben looks away first. That evening, after closing, John prepares watermelon upstairs and sets it beside Darling without comment. He sits close, not touching, guarding space rather than claiming it. I won't miss it again, he says quietly. Darling nods. I know. Downstairs, Ben finishes his end-of-day checks. Lights, walkways, sightlines, front lock, back lock, office files backed up, property folder updated, 3 quiet windows protected for tomorrow. He pauses at the foot of the staircase and looks at Maggie. She stands where she always stands. Red hair, hazel eyes, still as a rule. Ben lowers his voice, though he knows how ridiculous that is. I don't know what you are, he says. Maggie does not move. Ben glances at the camera, then back at her. But I know what you're for. Still nothing. Of course nothing. Ben feels foolish. Then the building creaks softly above him. Not warning. Not answer. Only settlement. He accepts it anyway. When he finally locks the studio and steps out into the evening, his phone shows 7 missed calls from his family. He deletes the notifications without opening them. Inside the studio, the mannequins stand. Maggie waits. Upstairs, Darling sleeps with one hand on her stomach, John beside her, the baby quiet and held. The pressure has not broken anything yet, but the system is ready. Chapter 7. The man does not introduce himself when he comes in. He does not need to. John recognizes him immediately from the cadence of the emails, the way politeness was shaped like persistence, the way interest slid so easily into assumption. He has the posture of someone who believes space exists to be reorganized if you ask often enough. He pauses just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust, already assessing ceiling height, load-bearing walls, the depth of the floor. He does not look at the mannequins as bodies. He looks at them as obstacles. Darling is upstairs. That matters. It is not one of the windows. Not exactly. But she's been tired since morning, the baby heavy in a way that is not weight so much as insistence. John had watched her climb the stairs slowly, one hand resting low on her stomach, and forced himself not to follow. Rest is also a system. He is trying to remember that. Ben notices the man before John does. He clocks the shoes first, expensive, impractical, unsuited to a working space. Then the coat. Then the watch, modest enough to pretend it isn't expensive, and expensive enough to make sure the right people know. Then the way the man's gaze lifts immediately, counting volume, calculating, taking ownership in his head before anyone has given him permission to stand there. Ben's spine goes very still. Not Darling still. Not hive still. The other kind. The kind learned in rooms where men smiled while deciding what belonged to them. He moves half a step to the left, adjusting the angle of the central display without comment. The developer's path narrows slightly. He frowns, unaware of why. Nice setup, the man says, voice easy. Bit underutilized though. John smiles politely. We're using all of it. Not efficiently, the man replies. He gestures vaguely, already comfortable. Too comfortable. That unit upstairs is private, John says. The man laughs, the sound pitched as reassurance rather than humor. Everything's negotiable. Ben feels the studio change. It is subtle at first. A tightening near the back wall. A faint redistribution of attention. The kind of shift he has learned to notice before he can explain it. Usually, Darling is the center of that shift. Today, she is upstairs. Today, the room answers without her. The mannequins do not move. Not in any way a camera would understand. But the space between them changes. A shoulder turned half a degree that Ben knows was not turned before. A line of bodies near the central aisle becoming less decorative and more deliberate. The front display, which he had angled only slightly, now seems to hold the man inside a path he did not choose. Ben's mouth goes dry. The hive, he thinks. The word arrives without permission. He has not said it aloud. None of them have. Not properly. They still say the mannequins. The studio. The room. Maggie. Safer words. Ordinary words. But ordinary words are starting to fail. This is not one mannequin responding. Not even Maggie alone at the stairwell. Calm and unreadable in camera frame. This is collective. A distributed attention. A body made of bodies. A hive. The developer steps farther inside. The studio dislikes him. Ben does not know how he knows that. He knows. Maggie stands nearest the staircase. She always does. Her red hair is tied back today, neat and bright and severe. Her posture is neutral enough to pass as display work if someone does not know what readiness looks like. Feet planted, arms relaxed, chin lifted slightly. She is in the camera's view. That matters too. Maggie never wastes visibility. The developer's gaze slides toward her. He pauses. Only briefly. But Ben sees it. So does John. The man does not look frightened. Men like him rarely recognize fear until it has become inconvenient. But something in his face tightens, as if the room has asked him a question he does not intend to answer. "What's that one for?" he asks. Ben answers before John can. "Balance." The truth lands quietly. The developer's eyes flick to him. For the first time, he seems to register Ben as more than staff-shaped background. "And you are?" Ben feels the old answer behind his teeth. The surname. The one that would change the man's face. The one that would make him recalibrate. Not because Ben had become more worth hearing, but because ownership recognizes ownership. Money knows its own architecture. Men like this were trained to bow. Not to goodness, not to truth, but to leverage. Ben does not give it to him. "Ben," he says. The developer waits for more. Ben gives him nothing. John's mouth barely moves, but Ben catches the smallest twitch. Approval. Or amusement. Possibly both. The developer turns back to John, dismissing Ben with the ease of someone who believes assistants are useful only when they open doors. "I sent a few emails," he says. "I saw them," John replies. "Didn't get much back." "You got our answer." The man smiles. "Not really." "Yes," John says. "You did." There is a pause. A clean one. John has learned from Darling. From Ben too, though he would not say that yet. Silence does not need filling just because someone else finds it inconvenient. The developer looks around again. "Look," he says, softening his voice into reason. "This street is changing. You know that. Independent businesses are lovely, but they either adapt or get swallowed. I'm trying to make sure you're on the right side of that change." Ben feels his fingers curl slightly. There it is. The gift wrapping around a threat. John hears it too. "We're not interested." "You haven't heard the proposal." "We're still not interested." The man's smile thins. Outside, traffic moves past the front windows. A bus sighs at the curb. Someone walks by carrying coffee, glancing in briefly at the mannequins before looking away. Normal life continues on the other side of glass. Inside, the hive tightens. Ben sees the nearest mannequin's shadow shift. Not the mannequin. The shadow. Or maybe the light. He looks at the camera feed on the office monitor. Everything appears normal. Of course it does. The hive knows the difference between being seen and being recorded. That thought should frighten him more than it does. Instead, he feels an odd relief. Good. Let the camera see only what they deserve. The developer steps toward the back of the studio, angling himself toward the staircase. Ben mirrors him instinctively, closing distance without confrontation. The man notices. "You don't mind if I have a quick look?" John's voice is calm. "I do." "At the workspace?" "You're looking at it." "At the upstairs unit?" "No." The word lands flat. "Absolute." The developer stops walking. His gaze sharpens now that compliance has not followed assumption. "You understand there are safety considerations," he says. "We meet code." "Current code, perhaps." John does not blink. Current code is code. Ben almost smiles. The man's gaze flicks past John again, toward the stairs, toward Maggie. Maggie does not move, but the studio's attention narrows so sharply that Ben feels it in his teeth. The hive is not angry. That is what unsettles him most. Anger is hot, messy, human. This is not anger. This is assessment. The man has approached a boundary. The hive has noticed. The developer takes one more step. A small one. Testing. Maggie remains still. But the mannequins nearest the staircase seem suddenly less like display pieces and more like a closed sentence. Pale bodies. Quiet faces. Hands arranged without softness. They create no physical barricade, and yet the path to the stairs feels narrower than it was a second ago. The man stops again. His irritation flickers. What exactly is your issue? He asks John. My issue, John says, is that you keep asking for access to my home. It's above a commercial space. It's still my home. It's relevant to the footprint. It's relevant to my wife and child. The word child changes the room. The baby is not born yet. Not named yet. Still hidden beneath Darling's body upstairs. But the hive responds anyway. A faint creak passes through the studio. Not from one mannequin. From many. A tiny, almost inaudible adjustment of stands, joints, bases, old timber floor beneath distributed weight. The developer looks around. This time, he does notice. What was that? Old building, Ben says. John does not look away from the man. The developer's eyes narrow, but he lets it pass because ordinary explanations are comfortable and men like him prefer comfort when it flatters them. Children complicate things, he says lightly. John goes still. Ben feels the room sharpen. Even the front window seems to hold its breath. The developer must sense something because he lifts both hands slightly. I only mean practically, he says. Mixed-use buildings, residential occupancy, business hazards, resin, tools, public access. If you're bringing a baby into this environment, council will have opinions. Ben moves before John does. Not forward. Not threatening. Only sideways, placing himself closer to the office desk where his phone rests recording audio. The developer notices that too late. His face smooths. You're recording? Ben looks at him. Yes. John's eyes flick briefly to Ben. Ben does not apologize. The man laughs, but there is no ease in it now. That seems unnecessary. Then it won't matter, Ben says. For a moment, the developer looks at him properly. Not as background. Not as staff. As an obstacle. Ben knows that look. He has seen it across family tables, in boardrooms, at charity dinners where men discussed consequences with clean fingernails and soft voices. The look that says, who gave you permission to matter? Ben's hands remain still. He does not give the surname. He will not buy safety with the very thing he came here to escape. John steps half a pace forward. The developer's attention returns to him. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be, the man says. John's voice lowers. No. The man waits. John finishes calmly. You are. The room settles around the sentence. The hive likes precision. Ben feels that with a sudden, strange certainty. Not politeness. Not aggression. Precision. Boundaries said plainly. Doors named as doors. No turned into a complete answer. The baby shifts upstairs. Ben cannot see it, but the studio registers it. The hive registers it. A soft pressure moves through the room, almost like breath passing from one body to another. Maggie remains perfectly still at the stairwell, but the mannequins closest to her seem to answer. Darling is upstairs, but she is not absent. The baby is upstairs, but the hive knows where she is. Ben's throat tightens. She. He does not know why the word comes. He thinks it anyway. The developer exhales through his nose. Fine, he says. We'll do this formally. That would be best, Ben says. The man's eyes cut to him. John says, send everything in writing. I will. Good. And when council requests access, we'll respond to council, John says. Not to you. The developer smiles again. There is nothing warm left in it. You think ownership protects you from process. John holds his gaze. I think ownership means you don't get to walk upstairs because you want to. A small sound comes from near the staircase. Not loud. Not dramatic. A settling click. The kind a mannequin stand might make if weight shifted through it. The developer turns his head. Maggie has not moved. The camera feed proves it. Ben checks without meaning to. Maggie on the monitor. Still. Maggie in the room. Still. And yet the space around her has altered. The path to the stairwell is closed. Not physically. Worse. Intentionally. The developer stares at her longer this time. His face does not show fear. But his body understands before his pride does. He steps back. One pace. Then another. The hive eases by a fraction. Ben breathes for the first time in too long. The man looks between John and Ben. This isn't over. John says nothing. Ben says nothing. The hive says nothing. That seems to unsettle the man more than argument would have. He turns toward the door. As he passes the front display, The mannequins there stand in their careful arrangement, pale and elegant beneath softened light. Ben knows exactly how he placed them that morning. He also knows they are not quite where he left them. The man's shoulder nearly brushes one. He flinches before contact, then catches himself and straightens. John sees it. Ben sees it. The man leaves without saying goodbye. The door closes behind him. The lock clicks. For 5 seconds, nobody moves. Then Ben exhales. The sound is shakier than he wants it to be. John turns the deadbolt. Once. Twice. Then stands with his hand still on the lock. You recorded? He asks. Yes. All of it. From children complicate things onward. John closes his eyes briefly. Good. Ben slips into the office and saves the file immediately. Copies it. Labels it. Backs it up. Date. Time. Uninvited visit. Attempted access to private residence. Reference to council pressure. Reference to unborn child. He types quickly because his hands are not steady when they are idle. John remains near the front door for another moment, watching the street through the glass. The developer is gone. The pressure is not. That is how these men work. They leave the room and stay in the walls. Upstairs, floorboards creak. Darling. John looks up. Ben does too. She appears at the top of the staircase in a loose dress. One hand on the rail, the other resting low over her stomach. Her face is pale, but calm. Not frightened. Listening. Maggie stands at the bottom of the stairs between Darling and the room. Still. Guarding. Darling looks at Maggie first. Then at John. Then at Ben. He came in, she says. Not a question. John nods. Yes. Darling descends slowly. John moves toward the stairs, but stops before he crowds her. Ben sees him do it. Sees the effort in it. Protection that does not become possession. Darling reaches the bottom step and pauses beside Maggie. Her fingers brush Maggie's shoulder. The hive settles. Not fully. Not asleep. But enough. The studio's attention loosens from a blade into a hand. Darling closes her eyes for half a second. The room held, she says. John's voice is quiet. Yes. Ben steps out of the office. He wants to explain. To list the facts. To show the file. To say what happened in the correct order because correct order is the only thing keeping the impossible from becoming too large. But Darling is not looking at the office. She is looking at the mannequins. At the front display. The center aisle. The bodies near the staircase. Her expression changes slowly. Recognition first. Then grief. Then something like awe. They did it without me, she says. John looks around. Ben follows his gaze. Nothing has changed enough to prove anything. Everything has changed enough to matter. Darling's hand tightens gently on Maggie's shoulder. The baby moves beneath her other palm. The hive responds. Small shifts. Not visible movement. Not exactly. More like the studio's stillness becoming organized around a center. Darling inhales slowly. She told them, she whispers. John's eyes move to her stomach. Ben's chest tightens. The baby. Not born. Not named. Not speaking. Still instructing. Or asking. Or being answered. Ben does not know which possibility frightens him more. Darling opens her eyes. Her gaze finds Ben. You saw it. Ben swallows. Yes. What did you see? He considers lying. Not because he wants to. Because truth sounds insane until enough people share it. Then he looks at Maggie. Still in frame. Still refusing to perform for the cameras. He looks back at Darling. The hive, he says. The word lands in the room like something that had been waiting to be named. John turns slightly toward him. Darling goes very still. Not the window still. Not the baby still. A listening stillness. Ben regrets the word immediately, and also knows it is right. They moved together, he says, quieter now. Not visibly. Not enough to catch. But together. They tightened around the staircase when he tried to get near it. The front display narrowed his path. Maggie held the line. Darling's eyes shine faintly. Not with tears exactly. With recognition. The hive, she repeats. The building settles. A pipe ticks in the wall. Outside, a car passes. Inside, every mannequin stands exactly where it is. John rubs one hand over his mouth. All right, he says, because that is what John says when the world has changed and he has decided to keep moving inside it. Ben almost laughs. Darling looks at him. All right. John exhales. We have a hive. Ben says, apparently. We have a developer trying to get upstairs. Yes. We have evidence. Yes. John looks at Maggie, then at Darling's stomach, then at Ben. And we have a system. Ben nods slowly. Darling's mouth softens, though there is nothing easy in her face. The system changed today, she says. No one argues. Because it has. Before, they protected Darling's stillness. Today, the hive protected the baby. Without Darling directing it. Without John commanding it. Without Ben designing it. Ben feels the shape of that settle inside him with uncomfortable clarity. Systems are supposed to be built. This one is growing. That is different. That is harder to control. That might be better. Darling takes her hand from Maggie's shoulder. For a moment, nothing happens. Then Maggie seems ordinary again. Still beautiful. Still unnerving. But less charged, less central. The hive loosens around her. Not gone. Waiting. Darling looks toward the front door. He'll come back, she says. John nods. Yes. Ben says. Not casually next time. John looks at him. Ben continues. He'll use process. Counsel. Safety. Maybe an anonymous complaint. Maybe an investor. He'll try to make refusal look like non-compliance. Darling listens carefully. John's face hardens. What do we do? John asks. Ben feels the old family knowledge rise in him. Polished and unpleasant. How to slow pressure. How to answer without yielding. How to make access expensive. How to turn process back on the people who use it as a weapon. His father would be proud of the knowledge. Ben hates that. He uses it anyway. We make everything boring, Ben says. John blinks. Boring. Documented. Compliant. Dated. Witnessed. No phone calls without notes. No meetings without agenda. No access without written authority. No authority accepted without verification. John nods slowly. Darling says, and the hive. Ben looks at the mannequins. His voice is quieter when he answers. We don't rely on it instead of records. Darling's gaze softens. But we don't ignore it either, she says. No, Ben agrees. We don't ignore it. The baby shifts again. Darling presses her palm low over the movement. This time, Ben does not look away quickly enough. For one strange second, he feels the studio's attention pass over him. Not threatening. Not warm. Assessing. He holds still. The hive does not reject him. That should not matter. It does. John sees something in his face and says nothing. Thank God. Darling smiles faintly. She likes you, she says. Ben's throat tightens. The baby? Darling looks down at her stomach. Then around the studio. Both, I think. Ben has no answer to that. He returns to the office because emails are easier than whatever has just happened. John follows after a moment. Darling remains near Maggie, one hand resting on her stomach, the other hanging loose at her side. Not trapped. Not frozen. Held. For the first time, the studio does not feel like a workplace with strange things inside it. It feels like one organism. Ben saves the audio file again. Then saves it a third time somewhere no one will accidentally delete. He opens a new document. Title. Access Protocol. He pauses. Then adds another word. Access/Hive Protocol. He stares at it. Ridiculous. Accurate. Necessary. Outside. The developer's world continues with its permits and emails and expensive shoes. Inside, the hive waits. Not asleep. Not awake in any human way. Waiting. At the bottom of the stairs, Maggie stands in camera frame. Still as a rule. Still as warning. Still as proof that the building has begun to understand what belongs to it. And upstairs, though she has not yet been born, the baby settles. The room settles with her. Chapter 8. The doctor stops smiling halfway through the appointment. It is subtle, the kind of shift you only notice if you have learned to read rooms for safety rather than reassurance. Her pen pauses above the page. She glances back at the screen, then at Darling's stomach, then at the numbers again. Darling notices. John notices. The baby notices too. Darling feels the small internal pause, not a kick, not a flutter. A listening. She lets herself become still. Not trapped. Not frozen. Listening. John feels it immediately. The air tightens in that precise way he has learned not to interrupt. He leans back slightly, not touching her, giving space rather than grounding. The doctor looks at the monitor again. I'd like to talk about next steps, she says carefully. Darling moves again, just enough to signal attention. What kind of steps? John asks. Monitoring, the doctor replies. More frequent scans. Hospital birth. Continuous observation closer to delivery. Darling exhales slowly. The baby shifts once. Not in protest. Not in distress. Present. What's the risk? John asks. The doctor hesitates. That is the wrong answer. Not because hesitation is cruel. Because hesitation reveals the shape of the problem before language tidies it. The timeline is atypical, the doctor says. Growth spurts aren't following the expected curve. Measurements are inconsistent with standard gestational progression, although the heartbeat is strong and there are no signs of immediate distress. John listens without moving. Darling listens with her whole body. The doctor continues, choosing each word as though the wrong one might alarm them. We don't have a reliable framework for this pattern. Darling looks at her. You don't have a framework, she says calmly. The doctor blinks. I beg your pardon? You're measuring something that only grows when conditions are right, Darling says. Pressure stops it. Silence. The doctor's face changes again. Not disbelief exactly. Professional discomfort. Authority wrestling briefly with data it cannot arrange. Pregnancy does not generally function that way, she says. No. Darling replies. This one does. John turns his head slightly toward her. There is no surprise in his face. Only confirmation. He knows now. Not all of it. Not in the way Darling knows it from inside her body. But enough. Enough to understand that the calendar has become less useful than the room. Enough to know that pressure is not neutral. Enough to know that if the baby grows only when stillness holds, then forcing progress would not be care. It would be interference. The doctor folds her hands. We need to ensure the safety of both mother and baby. We are, John says gently. The doctor's jaw tightens. Hospital births exist for a reason. So do homes, Darling replies. The baby stills with her again. Synchronized. Deliberate. The doctor looks at the screen as if it might argue on her behalf. It does not. Heartbeat steady. Movement present. Growth strange, but not failing. Everything measurable is calm. Everything unmeasurable is where the truth lives. I strongly recommend a hospital delivery, the doctor says finally. At minimum, I would advise late-stage admission for observation. No, Darling says. John does not speak over her. He lets the word stand. The doctor looks at him then, perhaps expecting him to soften it. Explain it. Translate his wife into something more manageable. He does not. We're declining hospital delivery, John says. And continuous observation. That's not advisable. We understand your position. I need to document this. Of course, John replies. Document our informed refusal. Darling's hand rests low on her stomach. The baby moves beneath it, slow and settled. The doctor's expression softens slightly, though whether from concern or defeat, Darling cannot tell. I'm not trying to frighten you, she says. I know. Darling replies. And she does know. That almost makes it harder. The doctor is not an enemy. She is not trying to claim Darling's body, not really. She is trying to place the impossible into the safest ordinary container she knows. Hospital. Monitoring. Observation. Control. Darling has lived inside control before. She knows the difference between safety and containment. John does too. They leave with forms instead of pamphlets. Outside, the air feels too bright. Too open. Darling leans against the car and eats watermelon from a container she brought with her, one cube at a time. The baby settles almost immediately, a low, measured movement that reads less like reassurance and more like confirmation. John stands beside her, one hand on the roof of the car, looking back at the clinic doors. She wasn't wrong to be concerned, he says. No, but she was wrong about what helps. Darling nods. A bus passes. The air moves against her face. For a moment, the city feels ordinary enough to hurt. John looks at her stomach. So we do this at home. Yes. When the baby is ready. Yes. He exhales slowly. No argument. No performance of bravery. Just the visible work of accepting what the system has already known. All right, he says. Darling looks at him. There it is again. That word he uses when the world rearranges itself, and he decides to keep standing inside it. Not surrender. Alignment. She smiles faintly. All right. He nods. We make home ready. The studio too. The studio too. And Ben. John's mouth twitches. Ben has probably already made a folder. He has. Of course he has. Back at the studio, Ben has not made one folder. He has made 3. One for medical documents. One for home birth preparation. One labeled conditions. John sees the last title on the office screen and pauses. Conditions, he asks. Ben does not look embarrassed. Environment, access, interruptions, emergency contact list, supply inventory, quiet windows, downstairs layout, upstairs layout. John looks at him. Ben looks back. What? You made a birth protocol. I made a conditions protocol. That's worse. It's more accurate. John rubs one hand across his face. Darling. Standing near the office doorway, smiles despite herself. Ben sees it and looks away quickly, as if being caught caring is worse than being caught unprepared. I haven't finalized it, he says. Naturally, John replies. The studio is quiet around them. Not empty, not asleep. Listening in that way, darling has stopped pretending she cannot feel. Maggie stands at the base of the stairs, exactly where she belongs. After chapter 7, no one has moved her. No one has moved any of them, not really. Ben still adjusts lights, doors, appointments, files, people. But not the mannequins. Not unless the hive allows it. He learned that the morning after the developer came. He had arrived early, as always, and found the front display slightly altered. 2 mannequins angled toward the door. The central aisle narrowed. Maggie half a step forward of where he remembered her. The CCTV showed nothing. No movement. No glitch. No proof. The arrangement was better than his. That was the irritating part. So he had stood there for a full minute, hands on his hips, offended by furniture with superior instincts. Then he had said, quietly, fine. And he had stopped correcting what already knew where to stand. Now he works around them, not over them. That is the adjustment. A small one. A massive one. Darling steps out of the office and crosses the studio floor. The baby is quiet, but not absent. She can feel the heaviness of becoming. The slow work of being made only when the world allows enough stillness. 10 months. She knows that now without counting. Not from the doctor's charts. Not from a due date. From the shape of her own body, from the rhythm of growth and pause, from the way the hive prepares and does not hurry. 13 months. Give or take a day. The number does not frighten her. It simply arrives. The calendar can call her overdue if it wants. The calendar is not in charge. Darling stops near Maggie. Not fully still. Just quiet enough to listen. The hive responds in degrees too small for a human eye to defend. A tightening near the staircase. A soft opening of the central floor. A settling through the mannequins nearest the back wall. They know what is coming. Not as an image. Not as dread. As pressure. They prepare the way a body prepares for impact. By aligning, tightening, holding. Ben watches from the office. He does not touch the keyboard. For once, he lets the moment happen without turning it into a note. John comes to stand beside Darling. Near enough that she can feel him. Far enough that he does not crowd the signal. You all right? He asks. Yes. The baby? Waiting. John nods. Ben finally speaks from the office doorway. I'll remove all non-essential appointments from the next month. John glances back. The next month. Ben's expression says he has already done worse in the spreadsheet. 6 weeks, he admits. Darling turns her head. Ben. What? You don't need to cancel the entire business. I didn't cancel it. I slowed it. John mutters. That means he canceled some of it. Ben ignores him. Darling smiles faintly, then rests her hand low on her stomach. The smile fades as the next stillness approaches. Not sudden. Not dangerous. An internal request. The room notices before she does. John steps back. Ben lowers the office phone. Maggie remains where she is. Darling lets herself be placed. Her body becomes quiet, balanced, deliberate. Breath slows. The baby stills with her. Then growth comes. Not dramatic. Not visible to anyone else in the room. But Darling feels it. Accommodation. Her body making space. The room allowing it. The hive holding the edges. When she releases, she is more tired than before. Fuller. Heavier in the way of something becoming complete, not strained. John sees the change in her face. Ben sees it in the way John sees it. Neither of them speaks. The system has taught them that not every truth needs a sentence immediately. That night, upstairs, Darling lies on the couch with one hand resting low on her stomach. John sits on the floor beside her, reviewing the conditions protocol because Ben has printed it and left it where John cannot avoid it. There are sections. Of course there are sections. Lighting, temperature, access, food, medical contacts, emergency transfer conditions, who speaks to outsiders, who stays with Darling, who stays with the baby, who handles records, who locks the studio. John reaches the last line and stops. No one touches Darling while she is fully still unless the hive permits it or immediate physical safety requires it. He reads it twice, then looks toward the stairs. Ben is still downstairs. Working. Always working. John does not know whether to be grateful or unsettled by how precisely Ben understands the difference between care and control. Both, probably. Darling's eyes are half closed. Is it terrible? She asks. The protocol? Yes. It's very Ben. She smiles without opening her eyes. That means useful. It also means mildly alarming. That too. Below them, the studio settles. Maggie holds the stairs. The other mannequins stand in their chosen positions. Ben locks up and checks the cameras one last time. Everything looks normal, which he has learned is not the same as unimportant. Before he leaves, he pauses near Maggie. He does not speak this time. Not because he feels foolish. Because he no longer needs to fill the silence to know it has hurt him. He checks the front door, the back door, the lights, the account balance. The numbers are not good. Not yet. He has known that for weeks. John knows part of it. Darling knows almost none of it. Both of them are too occupied with pressure, growth, and the impossible practicalities of preparing for a baby the world cannot measure. Ben sits at the office desk after closing and looks at the figures again. The business is viable. Eventually. Not now. Not fast enough. A supplier payment is due. Insurance has increased after the inspection inquiries. 2 deposits are late. The developer pressure has made everything slower, more expensive, more careful. Ben opens a private account on his phone. He stares at the screen for a long moment. His family money sits there with all its polished ugliness. Available. Heavy. Useful in the way traps are useful if you know where the teeth are. He hates touching it. He hates needing it. Then he thinks of the baby upstairs, growing only when conditions hold. He thinks of Darling standing in the studio, trusting the room. He thinks of John saying no to men who expect doors to open. He transfers enough to cover the gap. Not to Darling. Not to John. Not in any way that can be seen as generosity. He pays the supplier directly, from a business-facing holding account no one will question because Ben knows how to make money look like timing. He updates the cash flow sheet. The winter column softens by 1 degree. No one knows. No one needs to. Ben closes the laptop and sits in the dark office for a moment longer than necessary. Outside, pressure waits. Inside, everything is becoming ready. Nothing is being rushed. Nothing is being forced. The system is preparing. And it knows exactly what it is doing. Chapter 9. Darling stands among the mannequins and finally stops pretending she hasn't known all along. Not pretending to them. Pretending to herself. She is not their owner. She is their origin. The knowledge does not arrive dramatically. No revelation. No voice. No sudden movement through the room. Only a settling. A truth that has been standing in plain sight, waiting for her to stop walking around it. The mannequins are not copies. Not tools. Not children. They are distributed pieces of her stillness, given form so the work can continue when she cannot move. Each one holds something she shed without noticing: patience, balance, restraint, attention, shaped into bodies that can act only when action is required. That matters. Only when required. The old curse did not understand restraint. Callum had wanted stillness as punishment. Stillness as ownership. Stillness as a body forced into obedience forever. This is not that. This is what happened after Darling survived him. Stillness learned other uses. It learned waiting. It learned boundary. It learned that a body can stop without surrendering. The hive communicates when it matters. What passes between them is alignment, a tightening or easing of attention, a shared orientation toward what is required. Information moves through the studio the way pressure moves through a body. Instantly, without instruction, without debate. When nothing is required, they are silent. When something is, they know. No one issues commands. No one waits to be told. The knowing arrives fully formed, distributed across the room in the same moment. Action follows only if action is needed. This is not conversation. It is consensus. Darling walks slowly through the studio, one hand resting low on her stomach. The baby is quiet today, but not absent. The quiet has texture now. Meaning. Waiting has become a language. Maggie stands nearest the staircase. She always does. Up close, she is unmistakably Darling's work. Not because she resembles Darling, but because the intention is visible in every line. Maggie is slender, without fragility. Her proportions are deliberate and exact. Her legs are long and solid, built for balance rather than display, powerful enough to hold ground without exaggeration. Her torso is muscular in the way of someone who has never wasted movement, toned, resilient, unmistakably strong, yet still feminine in presence and form. Her skin is pale, flawless, without polish. Her hair, deep flaming red, is drawn back simply, as if excess would only interfere with function. Hazel eyes look out from a face that is beautiful without softness, composed, assessing, capable of refusal. Maggie does not invite attention. She commands it. There is authority in her posture that has nothing to do with dominance. Strength without aggression. Restraint without submission. Her body shows what Darling values most. Capacity. Endurance. The ability to hold when others break. She is not tagged. She is not priced. Clients are shown Maggie as an example only. This is what Darling's work can achieve. Presence. Integrity. Balance. On the rare occasion someone asks to buy her, the answer is immediate and absolute. Maggie is not for sale. She is not merchandise. She is infrastructure. Darling understands now why Maggie takes the center when Darling is absent. It is not leadership. It is continuity. Maggie follows Darling's flow the way a river follows gravity. Not because it is commanded to, but because it knows where the weight belongs. When pressure enters the system, Maggie mobilizes the others without instruction. Not to dominate, but to protect what matters. The hive does not have a queen in the way people imagine queens. Not a ruler. Not a crown. A center. That is Darling's role. Origin. Center. First stillness. But even that is changing. The baby shifts beneath Darling's hand. Slow. Deliberate. Other. Darling closes her eyes. The baby is not the hive. That is what makes her precious. She is not Mannequin. She is not simply human in the way humans rush and bruise and demand things before they are ready. She is something else. She carries Darling's gift of stillness, without inheriting Darling's limits. She can pause without being lost. She can wait without being owned. She can grow without being forced. The mannequins feel this difference instinctively, the way a body knows the difference between bone and organ. They protect the baby because she is Darling's continuation, not her repetition. Darling opens her eyes. John is standing near the office, reading a printed email with the expression he gets when someone has used polite words badly. He belongs to the hive too. Not as origin, not as command, as boundary. He is the one who stands between the inside and the outside and absorbs what presses in. He handles language, paperwork, faces that believe persistence equals access. He does not bring pressure into the hive. He stops it at the edge and lets it die there. He does this without asking for recognition. It is simply his role. Darling watches him write something in the margin. Jaw set, shoulders steady. There was a time when John would have reached for her first, touched her, grounded her, pulled her back. He knows better now. Love has changed shape in him. It has become space. It has become waiting. It has become a locked door and a calm reply and a body that stands near without taking over. Ben belongs too. Darling does not fully understand how yet. That is the part that hums at the edge of her awareness without arranging itself into a complete answer. Ben is not just witness, not subordinate, not employee, though employee is the shape that allowed him to enter. He is sustainer. He maintains the systems Darling cannot attend to, the schedules, the finances, the slow reinforcement of things that must never collapse. He notices patterns before they announce themselves. He adjusts before anyone realizes adjustment was needed. And then, just as importantly, he stops adjusting. That is harder. Darling knows this because she has watched him learn it. At first, Ben moved everything. Lights, bookings, barriers, desks, bodies. He made the studio safer by touching every part of it he could understand. He turned danger into layout, fear into calendar entries, pressure into folders. Then the hive began arranging itself. And Ben, to his credit, let it. Not immediately, not gracefully, but he did. He learned the difference between keeping the system stable and trying to own its movement. That may be why the hive accepts him. One morning, after the developer's visit, Ben entered the studio and stopped short. Darling had been watching from the stairs. He stood at the threshold with his keys still in his hand, looking at the mannequins in their new formation. Maggie forward, staircase clear, front display narrowed, central bench protected. Ben frowned, checked the cameras, frowned harder, then looked back at the room. Well, he said quietly to no one. All right. He did not move a single mannequin. The hive had registered that. Darling had felt it. A small easing through the room. Recognition, not gratitude. Gratitude would have made Ben uncomfortable anyway. Recognition suited him better. He is in the office now, unaware of her watching him. Sleeves pushed to his elbows, hair slightly messy from running his hand through it. He is building another spreadsheet. Or dismantling one. Darling cannot tell. Ben's face looks the same either way. John steps into the office and says something. Ben answers without looking up. John says something else. Ben finally looks up, offended. Darling smiles. The baby moves. The hive settles around the sound of them. It is almost ordinary. Almost. Then Ben's phone lights on the desk. Darling sees his face change before he turns it over. Only a fraction. A tightening around the mouth. A withdrawal so fast most people would miss it. John does miss it. Darling does not. Ben places the phone face down and continues working. The call stops. A moment later, it starts again. He silences it. No explanation. No apology. Darling looks away because she understands privacy as a kind of shelter. But the hive does not forget. It rarely does. Later, after John goes upstairs and Darling rests in the studio's quiet center, Ben remains in the office with the door open. He thinks she is not paying attention. She is. Not to his work. To the pressure around him. It does not belong to the developer. It does not belong to the doctor. It is older, cleaner, polished. The kind of pressure that does not shove because it expects doors to open from habit. Ben transfers funds that night. Darling does not see it happen. John does not see it happen. The reader would, if the reader were watching closely enough. Ben sits alone in the office after closing. The studio dark except for the low desk lamp and the red pinpricks of the camera system. The account sheets are open in front of him. The business is not failing. That is the important thing. It is simply not yet strong enough to survive every pressure placed on it at once. A normal business could delay a supplier. A normal business could reschedule production. A normal business could cut expenses, postpone plans, borrow, negotiate, reduce. Darling Atelier is not normal. Its conditions matter. Stress travels through the building. Unpaid invoices become phone calls. Phone calls become interruptions. Interruptions become pressure. Pressure stops growth. Ben knows this. So Ben does what his family money was always designed to do. He makes a problem disappear before anyone has to feel it. The transfer is clean, unremarkable, disguised as timing. He routes it through a place John will not question because John is too honest to imagine money moving that way without announcing itself. He hates knowing how. He uses the knowledge anyway. Not as a gift. Not as a claim. Not as leverage. Never as leverage. The thought is so sharp it nearly makes him close the laptop. Instead, he finishes the payment, updates the ledger, and removes the evidence of urgency from tomorrow's work. The hive requires stability. That is enough. The next morning, Ben arrives to find the studio rearranged again. Not drastically, purposefully. The mannequins near the entry are angled slightly toward him. Not enough to alarm. Not enough to convince. Just enough that, if this were a human room, he might think he was being acknowledged. He stops in the doorway. His keys hang from one finger. For a moment, he looks younger than he usually lets himself look. Well, he says quietly. Nothing moves. Maggie stands at the staircase. Still. Watching. Ben clears his throat. Don't make it weird. Nothing moves. He nods once, as if that settles the matter, and gets on with his day. Darling never asks about the money. John never notices. Not then. That matters. Ben's belonging cannot begin as debt. Not to them. Not to himself. It begins as function. As steadiness. As the choice to remain useful, without turning usefulness into ownership. By afternoon, the studio feels different. Not safer exactly. More complete. Darling lowers herself carefully into stillness. Not because she must, but because the hive asks her to listen. Her body becomes quiet, balanced, placed. Around her, the mannequins draw fractionally closer. Not crowding. Not touching. Holding. The baby stills with her. Not trapped. Not delayed. Evaluating. Darling feels the growth when it comes. Not as movement. As accommodation. Her ribs seem to make room. Her hips soften by degrees too small to name. Her body accepts the next measure of becoming, and the room steadies around the work. This is not pregnancy as the doctor understands it. This is construction. Careful. Conditional. Sacred. Though Darling dislikes that word. Sacred things are too easily taken from women and turned into duties. This is not duty. This is consent repeated through conditions. The room allows. Darling allows. The baby waits until both are true. Then grows. When Darling releases from stillness, John is standing at the edge of the room. Not too close. Never too close now. Ben is in the office doorway. Maggie remains by the stairs. For a moment, Darling sees them all as the hive sees them. John at the boundary. Ben at the systems. Maggie at the threshold. The guardians in their positions. Darling at the center. The baby beneath her hand. Not yet born and already changing the architecture of everything. No one is above anyone else. That is the point. The hive is not hierarchy. It is placement. Everything where it must be, when it must be there. Outside, pressure continues. Emails arrive. Requests are made. Professional concern dresses itself in better clothes. The doctor leaves a message asking them to reconsider. The developer sends another formal notice. A supplier confirms payment and thanks Ben for prompt handling. Inside, everything knows its role. John locks the doors. Ben checks the records. Darling rests. Maggie holds the stairs. The hive watches without hurry. That evening, Darling stands alone in the studio after closing. Not truly alone. Never truly alone anymore. She walks between the mannequins slowly, touching one shoulder, then another. The contact is not command. Not inspection. More like greeting. She stops before Maggie. The two of them face each other in the dim light. Darling reaches out and rests her palm against Maggie's shoulder. The surface is cool. Stable. Familiar. Are you waiting for her? Darling asks quietly. Maggie does not answer. She does not need to. Darling feels the answer move through the hive. Not as words, but as orientation. Toward the stairs. Toward Darling's body. Toward the baby. Toward what is coming. Yes, Darling says. The baby shifts, slow and deliberate. The hive tightens, not closing in, not crowding, holding. For the first time, Darling understands the phrase fully. The queen holds. Not because she rules, because she remains. Maggie, the second, stands ready. Not beneath her, beside her. When Darling cannot stand at all, the guardians watch. Ben sustains. John guards. And something new, patient, precise, quietly impossible, continues becoming real only when stillness allows it. Darling exhales. The studio exhales with her. Nothing is being rushed. Nothing is being forced. Everything is almost ready. Chapter 10. The call does not arrive as sound. It arrives as certainty. Darling is in the studio before she understands why. She has come down from the unit with one hand resting low on her stomach and the other trailing along the stair rail, following a pressure that has been building all afternoon. Not pain. Not warning. Alignment. The studio is quiet in the late light. Too quiet, perhaps, but quiet has changed meaning here. Once, silence meant absence. Emptiness. The dreadful pause before something was taken from her. Now quiet means attention. The mannequins stand in their chosen positions, not arranged by Ben, not arranged by Darling, but settled into the formation the hive has held for days. The central floor is open. The front display narrows the entrance path. The staircase is visible from 3 camera angles. And Maggie stands where she always stands, at the base of the stairs. Forward. Still. Waiting. Darling pauses halfway across the studio. The baby stills inside her. Not asleep. Not withdrawn. Listening. Darling knows then. Something has entered the system. Not physically, not yet, but close enough that the hive has already turned toward it. The pressure is outside and moving nearer. A body with intention. A decision already made. A person who has mistaken access for power. Darling's hand tightens once over her stomach. Then the call completes itself. Her body answers first. She stills. Not gently. Not slowly. Placed. Her weight distributes perfectly through both feet. Her spine aligns. Her shoulders settle back, without slackening. Breath reduces to the minimum required to remain. Her skin cools as if the room has drawn heat from her and stored it somewhere useful. She cannot move. She cannot speak. She cannot warn or reach or choose. She can only observe. This is the curse as it now exists. Not hunger. Not compulsion. Inheritance. Stillness has passed through her blood and into the world she made. What once demanded violence now demands containment. What once isolated her has been distributed, split into forms that can act when she cannot. The baby stills with her. Alert. Assessing. The front door opens. Not with stealth. Not with skill. With anger. The man who enters has the careless force of someone who believes pressure should eventually be rewarded. He is not the developer. Darling knows that immediately. The developer wears polish. This man wears resentment. His jacket is too loose, his movements too rough, his breathing too loud. But the shape of him belongs to the same pressure, the same entitlement, the same belief that no is only a temporary inconvenience if you press hard enough. He smells of fuel before Darling properly sees the container in his hand. The sharpness cuts through the clean, ordered air of the studio, chemical and bright, wrong against resin, timber, dust, watermelon sweetness lingering faintly from upstairs. Darling cannot flinch. She cannot call for John. She cannot tell Ben that his protocols have become real. The man shuts the door behind him with too much force. The sound moves through the hive. Not panic. Orientation. The mannequins do not move, not visibly. But Darling feels the system tighten around her. Around the staircase. Around the baby. The studio becomes one held breath. The man looks around. He sees mannequins. Of course he does. That is all men like him see when a body does not answer back. His gaze moves over Darling and dismisses the truth of her. He sees a woman standing too still near the stairs and decides she is frozen with fear. That mistake settles everything. He does not understand what she is. He does not understand that she cannot move. He does not understand that she does not need to. This is why the others exist. Maggie is already forward. Not by much. Not enough for the cameras to make sense of later. A degree of presence. A shift in the weight of the room. The quiet authority of a second taking the center when the first cannot. She has not been instructed. She does not need to be. When Darling is still in this way, fully placed, fully unreachable, the hive shifts authority without discussion. Maggie becomes voice and motion, not as command, but as necessity. The other mannequins tighten their formation fractionally. They do not speak. They do not need to. What passes between them is immediate and silent. A shared orientation toward threat, toward Darling, toward the baby, toward the staircase. They are not animated. They are permitted. The curse allows this. The curse requires it. The intruder moves deeper into the studio. His shoes squeak faintly on the polished concrete. He glances at the workbenches, the covered forms, the packed crates waiting near the rear wall. His jaw is tight, his face flushed with the kind of righteousness that has already rehearsed its own excuse. He mutters something Darling cannot quite hear. Something about being ignored. Something about people thinking they can just refuse. The words do not matter. The pattern does. He lifts the container. Fuel sloshes inside. His gaze flicks toward the staircase. Toward home. Toward the unit above. Toward where John keeps the cot half-assembled and Ben has taped a copy of the emergency contact list inside the pantry door because he thinks no one has noticed. Toward the place the baby will be born. The hive sharpens. Darling remains still. Inside her, the baby does not retreat. There is no fear in the pause. Only assessment. The intruder fumbles in his pocket. A matchbox scrapes against fabric. His movements are rushed now. Careless. Driven by the belief that destruction will force recognition. Darling watches. She cannot blink. She cannot look away. This is the price of her stillness. Awareness without agency. For one dreadful second, she is back in the old room. Not fully. Not truly. But memory does not ask permission before arriving. A prepared space. A man with a plan. Her body made useless, while someone else decides what should happen to it. Then the studio answers. Not with rage. With placement. The hive holds Darling where she is because moving her would break the condition. The hive holds the baby because the baby must not be rushed. The hive holds the staircase because nothing without intention is allowed through. And Maggie moves. It is not sudden. It is exact. A single step. Weight transferred cleanly. Momentum calculated rather than aggressive. She does not strike. She does not attack. She pushes. One hand to the intruder's chest. Firm. Precise. A correction of distance. The man's face changes before his body does. Surprise first. Then disbelief. Then fear. Arriving too late to teach him anything useful. His heel catches on the edge of the stair base. His arm jerks. The container slips from his grip and ruptures as he hits the concrete. Fuel spreads across him and the floor in a bright, ugly sheet. The match ignites. Brief. Bright. A tiny human decision becoming consequence. The system responds faster than panic can form. Flames catch. The alarm screams. The fire suppression system triggers with brutal, perfect force. Water crashes down from above, overwhelming, absolute. It pounds the concrete, the workbenches, the mannequins, Darling's motionless shoulders. Steam fills the space. The sharp chemical reek turns wet and suffocating. The intruder thrashes, screams. Then the water swallows the sound. Maggie steps back. Only one step. Enough to return to stillness. Enough to be where the cameras expect her to be. The other mannequins do not move. They never needed to. Darling remains placed. Water runs down her face. Over her open eyes. Along her lips. She cannot lift a hand to wipe it away. Cannot close her eyes against the sting. Cannot bend toward the baby or away from the smell, or toward the man on the floor. Awareness without agency. But this time, she is not alone inside it. The hive holds. The alarm continues. Water continues. The intruder's body goes still. The studio does not release immediately. That matters. It waits. It checks. Pressure must resolve fully before movement can return. Danger must not simply fall quiet. It must become absence. Darling feels the hive testing the room. The front door. The staircase. The air. The shape of the threat. Maggie remains at the base of the stairs. Wet hair darkened against her pale shoulders. Face unchanged. Body silent. Not triumphant. Not cruel. Not pleased. Only necessary. Then the pressure collapses. The hive releases Darling. Breath deepens first. Pain arrives second. Not injury, only return. Muscles warming. Skin waking. Lungs remembering they're allowed to ask for more air. Her knees soften. She does not fall. Maggie does not touch her. No one does. The baby moves inside her. Slow and deliberate, as if confirming what the hive already knows. Containment is complete. John arrives to alarms and water pooling across the studio floor. He takes everything in at once. The body. The fuel. The damage. Darling standing too straight. Too wet. too pale. Maggie at the staircase. The other mannequins in formation. His face empties for half a second. Then he becomes useful. Darling, he says. He does not touch her. He knows better. Her voice comes back rough. I'm here. That is all he needs. He turns toward the stairs, then the front door, then the cameras. Boundary. Exit. Evidence. His role finding him faster than fear can. Ben arrives moments later, already on the phone, already shifting into response. He is breathless but not loud. Never loud when the room is like this. Yes, he says into the phone. Fire suppression has activated. Trespasser inside the studio. Accelerant present. We need emergency services. His eyes go to the staircase. The sight lines. The cameras. Maggie. Then Darling. Then the floor. He sees the whole system in pieces and assembles it in a second. Everyone else is safe, he says. Everyone else. Darling hears the phrase and almost closes her eyes. Almost. Ben ends the call only when he is given the address twice, then moves without asking. Front door unlocked for responders. Back access checked. Electrical isolation noted. Camera system left running. Nothing touched that does not need touching. John comes closer to Darling, stopping an arm's length away. Can you move? Darling nods once. Baby. She rests a hand low on her stomach. The baby answers beneath her palm. Yes. John's face tightens. For a moment, he looks as though he might break. Then Ben says, from the office doorway, the footage is clean. John turns. Ben's voice is controlled, but his face is pale. Too clean, he adds. The footage shows what it needs to show. A trespasser. An accelerant. A match. A fall. A fire. A suppression system activating exactly as designed. And Maggie. Moving. Later, this is where certainty fractures. The footage is replayed again and again. Slowed. Enhanced. Analyzed. No one can agree on what they are seeing. Perspective distortion. Someone says. Water interference, says another. A trick of light. The angle is poor. The alarm strobed. The figure was already falling. The mannequin could not have moved because mannequins do not move. Therefore it did not. The conclusion forms because nothing else holds. An accident. A trespasser entered with accelerant. He attempted to start a fire. He slipped. The fuel ignited. The suppression system activated. The rest is confusion, panic, bad visibility, poor timing. The outside world loves an explanation that lets it remain unchanged. Ben helps it. Not by lying. By organizing the truth into shapes people can survive hearing. Times. Angles. Door logs. Compliance records. Fire system inspection dates. Insurance documents. Photographs of the ruptured container. The anonymous complaint history. The developer's requests for access. Every piece placed carefully, firmly, without flourish. He does not explain Maggie. He does not need to. John answers questions steadily. Darling says as little as possible. Maggie stands in the footage and in the studio and in no official sentence at all. The curse does not care what they call it. That night, after the building empties, Darling returns to the studio alone. Not truly alone. Never truly alone now. The water has been cleared. The worst damage contained. The air still smells faintly of smoke and chemicals beneath the sharp clean scent of industrial fans. The concrete is stained near the base of the stairs. That will need work. Everything will. Darling stands where she was frozen and lets herself breathe. One breath. Then another. Her body is hers again. That is not a small thing. Maggie is at the staircase. She does not touch Darling. She does not approach. She waits. Darling looks at her for a long time. The second. The guardian. The one permitted motion when Darling cannot move. I couldn't move. Darling says quietly. Maggie's voice is calm when it comes. The only one permitted sound when speech is required. We know. Darling's throat tightens. Not from fear. From the terrible gentleness of being understood without having to explain. I saw everything. We know. I thought. She stops. Because the sentence has too many endings. I thought I was back there. I thought I was alone. I thought he would reach the stairs. I thought my body had betrayed me again. Maggie waits. Darling presses one hand to her stomach. The baby is quiet now. Not absent. Resting. Darling breathes until the room stops tilting. Thank you, she says. Maggie inclines her head once. No warmth. No performance. Only acknowledgement. Above them, John locks the doors and checks the cameras. Below, Ben finishes the paperwork that will ensure no one ever asks the wrong questions in a way that matters. The curse has not ended. It has adapted. It no longer isolates. It distributes. And in that distribution, it has learned restraint. The baby stills, then grows. The hive holds. Chapter 11. The police arrive with clipboards and neutral voices. They ask the same questions in slightly different ways, circling the same facts until they are satisfied the circle closes on itself. John answers steadily, without haste or defensiveness. Ownership documents are produced again. Compliance records again. The fire suppression system is referenced again, though no one doubts that part anymore. It functioned exactly as designed. The officer says eventually, almost with relief. Yes, John replies. That's why it's there. Darling sits nearby, hands folded loosely in her lap, posture careful but not still. She listens without inserting herself. No one presses her for narrative. The footage does most of the work. A trespasser. Accelerant. Ignition. A fall. Automatic suppression. An accident that only looks strange if you are willing to believe impossible things. Most people are not. That is useful. Ben understands that before the police do. He gives them everything in the shape they can accept. Timestamps, camera angles, fire system documentation, access logs, prior reports, the developer's formal requests, the anonymous safety complaint, the written refusals. Each piece is ordinary enough to hold. Together, they form a wall. No one asks the wall why a mannequin moved. Not directly. One officer watches the footage 3 times and pauses on the frame where Maggie is almost not where she should be. Almost. Water distorts the image. Alarm lights fracture the timing. The intruder's own movement turns the moment into confusion. Maggie is visible and not visible at once, a pale shape at the edge of consequence. The officer leans closer. Ben says nothing. John says nothing. Darling keeps her hands loose in her lap. The officer rewinds. Watches again. Then exhales through his nose and lets the footage continue. Hard to see anything clearly once the suppression system starts, he says. Yes, Ben replies. That is all. The report begins closing itself. Not because the officers are careless. Because the world has rules, and one of them is this. Objects do not act. Therefore, whatever happened must be explained by the man who entered with fuel, the match he struck, the surface he slipped on, and the fire suppression system that answered exactly as it was meant to. The conclusion is almost merciful. Trespass. Attempted arson. Accidental ignition. Fatal outcome. No further suspicious activity identified. The curse does not care what the report calls it. Neither does the hive. Insurance moves faster than the police. An assessor walks the studio with a tablet, shoes squeaking faintly against the cleaned concrete. He notes water damage, electrical replacement, cleanup costs, smoke contamination, damaged stock. He pauses once near the staircase, looking down at the faint stain that remains despite all efforts to remove it. Then he continues. Good system, he says, nodding toward the ceiling. Ben, who has barely slept in 3 days, looks at him. Yes, he says. It is. The payout is approved within the week. Ben handles it. He always does. He allocates funds the way he allocates space. Cleanly, proportionately, without commentary. Repairs are scheduled. Materials ordered. Contractors move through under rules so strict John raises an eyebrow but does not object. No one works near the staircase without John present. No one enters the studio without signing in. No one moves a mannequin. The last rule is not written down. It does not need to be. The contractors discover quickly that the studio is easier if they leave things where they are. A toolbox set too close to Maggie's base becomes inconvenient within minutes. A coil of cable placed across the center aisle is stepped over twice. Cursed at once, then moved by the man who put it there. A painter tries to shift a mannequin near the back wall and finds 3 people suddenly in his way without understanding how the room arranged it. By the second day, the contractors stop interfering. The work goes faster after that. Darling watches the repairs quietly, not obsessively. Not anxiously. She is not frightened of the studio now. That surprises her for a while. She expected fear to settle into the walls after the fire. Expected the smell of smoke to turn the place against her. It does not. The studio has not been violated. It has been tested. There is a difference. The hive holds that difference firmly. The damaged areas are cleaned, replaced, reinforced. The floor near the stairs is resealed. The fire system is inspected and approved. The front locks are upgraded because John insists. The side entrance is reinforced because Ben had already ordered the hardware before anyone thought to ask. Maggie remains at the staircase through all of it. Still. Visible. Unmoved. Once, late in the afternoon, after the last contractor leaves, Darling stands before her for a long time. You pushed him, Darling says quietly. Maggie does not answer. She does not need to. Darling studies the red hair, the calm face, the hands that look delicate until you remember what they have done. You didn't kill him. Maggie's gaze remains forward. Darling feels the answer through the hive before any word could come. No. Not punishment. Distance. Correction. The match did the rest. Darling places one hand low on her stomach. The baby shifts once, slow and deliberate. She knows. Darling murmurs. This time, Maggie speaks. Only 2 words. She watched. Darling's throat tightens. Not with fear. With the terrible intimacy of it. The baby had watched through Darling's body. Through the hive. Through the stillness that held and did not allow panic to become motion. John hears Maggie's voice from the office doorway. He goes still. Then, behind him with a folder in one hand, freezes so completely, he looks briefly like he has joined the display. Maggie does not look at either of them. She has spoken because it was necessary. Now it is finished. Darling closes her eyes for a moment and breathes. All right. John says eventually, because apparently that is still the only word he has for the world becoming stranger, and continuing anyway. Ben makes a faint sound that might have been a laugh if he had not looked so pale. Darling turns toward them. She's allowed, she says. John nods. I gathered. Ben looks at Maggie, then at Darling. Only when necessary? Darling nods. Ben swallows. Right. His voice says he is filing this somewhere between fire safety and impossible household procedure. That is probably where it belongs. And then something shifts. Not in the hive. In the business. Orders increase. Not suddenly, not virally, steadily. Galleries follow up. Collectors who had been waiting quietly place deposits. Institutions confirm long-term placements. Darling's work circulates with a gravity it did not have before. As if something unresolved has finally settled into itself. The fire does not destroy the studio's reputation. It hardens it. No one outside understands why. They use words like resilience, mystique, provenance, emotional depth. A critic writes a short piece about the unsettling intimacy of Darling's work after surviving attempted destruction. A gallery director calls the studio haunted by embodiment, which makes John shut the laptop and walk away. Darling does not read any of it. Ben does. He reads everything. He tracks inquiries, deposits, shipping windows, restoration costs, insurance schedules, tax implications. He answers emails with the careful professionalism of someone who has decided the outside world will only touch this place through documents. The numbers begin to stabilize on their own. He notices first. He sits with the accounts one evening and realizes he has not transferred money in weeks. The buffers he built are untouched. Incoming revenue has overtaken outgoing support. Supplier terms are stable. Deposits are holding. Insurance has landed. The system is holding without him propping it up from underneath. For a long time, Ben only sits there. The relief is not dramatic. It is structural. Something in him, some braced and ugly little beam, stops carrying weight. The next day, he quietly unwinds the last of his personal contributions. No announcement, no acknowledgement, just a rebalancing that leaves the studio solvent on its own terms. He steps back. Darling never knows. John almost does. That happens on a Thursday, when Ben forgets one paper in the wrong folder and John notices a number that should not be there. Not the full thing. Not enough to understand. Just enough for his attention to sharpen. What's this? John asks. Ben looks over. Then stills. The old kind. The trained kind. John sees it immediately and hates the question for causing it. Adjustment, Ben says. John looks at him. Ben looks back. Neither of them moves. There is a whole conversation in the space between them. Money, pride, privacy, need. The difference between help and leverage. The danger of turning care into debt. John closes the folder. All right, he says. Ben exhales so quietly it almost does not happen. John does not ask again. Not then. Some truths need timing, and the baby has taught them all to respect timing. Darling is finishing. The remaining mannequins are completed with a care that feels ceremonial, though Darling would never call it that. Ceremony makes things sound distant. This is intimate, practical, final. She touches each one deliberately, aligning, correcting, closing small gaps she once might have left for later. She stills between pieces, letting the baby pause with her. Growth comes in increments now, only during stillness. She can feel the limit approaching, not as urgency, but as narrowing. The room allows less margin each day. Her body is reaching the edge of what it can hold without changing the terms. She accepts this without anxiety. The mannequins accept it too. Crates arrive in stages. Ben oversees packing and shipping with quiet efficiency. Each piece is documented, insured, photographed, wrapped, labeled. Destinations chosen months ago now become real. Galleries, private collections, institutions that will never fully understand what they are receiving. Not all mannequins leave. Some were never meant to. Maggie is not on the list. She never was. Neither are the few who remain closest to the staircase and the back wall. They have no price tags, no placement contracts, no invoices waiting. Guardians do not ship. One afternoon, John watches Darling stand before Maggie longer than usual. She's different, he says quietly. Darling nods. She has to be. She explains then, not the incident, not the violence, but the structure. When I'm like that, Darling says carefully, I can't move. I can't speak. I'm aware, but unreachable. John nods. He knows this part too well. Maggie can. Darling continues. Only when it's necessary. Only then. The others don't speak because they don't need to. They know what she knows. She protects you, John says. Yes. And the baby. Yes. He exhales slowly. There is fear in him, but it is not leading anymore. Clarity is. And when the baby comes, Darling rests one hand against Maggie's shoulder. The hive tightens around the question. Not alarmed. Attentive. I think Maggie will know what to do before we do, Darling says. John looks at Maggie. Maggie does not move. John nods once. Good, he says. The baby shower happens on a Sunday afternoon. It is not large. Ben organizes it without asking, which should annoy Darling more than it does. But he organizes it correctly, and that forgives a great deal. No games. No predictions. No insistence on sentiment. There is food, simple, fresh, mostly fruit. Chairs arranged loosely, not in a circle, leaving room for Darling to move or still as she needs to. Windows cracked open. The music low enough not to press against the walls. The guests are few and carefully chosen. People who know how to be in the space, without demanding the space explain itself. Gifts are practical. Blankets. Handmade clothes. Soft wraps. A small knitted cardigan so carefully made Darling has to look away for a moment before she can thank the woman who brought it. No one touches Darling without asking. No one comments on size or dates or whether she looks ready. No one says hospital. When she stills briefly, conversation softens around her without instruction. Someone refills a glass. Someone opens a window. Someone lowers their voice mid-sentence without knowing why. The baby pauses, then settles. It is the first time the hive extends beyond the building. Not permanently, not fully, just enough. A social room becomes a held room. An ordinary gathering becomes safe because everyone in it agrees, without being asked, not to disturb what is forming. Ben watches from the edge of the room, a glass of water in his hand. Maggie stands in the studio below, visible through the open door, exactly where she belongs. For a moment, just a moment, Ben feels something like acknowledgement again. Not gratitude, not recognition, belonging. He looks down quickly, annoyed with himself. Then the baby shifts. Darling's hand settles low. Ben sees it. He does not understand why the movement lands in him like instruction. Stay. So he does. That night, after the guests leave, the studio is almost empty. The final crate has been collected. The floor is clear. The space echoes faintly. Without the work-in-progress pieces, the room feels larger, less busy, more honest about its bones. Darling stands in the center and stills one last time in the working room. The baby pauses with her, then settles. The hive holds, not around production now, but presence. Upstairs, John locks the doors. Ben turns off the lights. Below them, Maggie remains, waiting. The work is finished. What comes next does not require production, only presence. Chapter 12. The studio is empty now. Not abandoned. Completed. Without the mannequins in production. The space feels larger than it ever did when it was full. Sound travels differently. Light settles instead of scattering. There is nothing left to adjust. Ben notices this first. He still comes in early out of habit, still checks the systems, lights, doors, cameras, but there is nothing to fine-tune. The numbers hold. Orders are fulfilled. Accounts reconcile themselves. Insurance matters are filed. Police matters are closed. Supplier accounts are current. For the first time in a long while, there is nothing for him to absorb. He does not trust it. Then, he lets that be enough anyway. This, too, is a skill. Upstairs, Darling wakes before dawn with a sensation that is not pain. Pressure, but not threat. Movement, but not urgency. She stills automatically. John wakes beside her, already alert, already quiet. He does not touch her. He waits for permission that never needs to be spoken. The baby stills with her. They listen together. Minutes pass, then longer. The pressure eases without resolving into anything else. Darling exhales. Not yet, she says. John nods. All right. There is no disappointment in his voice. Only readiness deferred. Downstairs, Maggie stands where she always does. The hive knows the difference between signal and noise. This was noise. The day passes calmly. Darling eats watermelon and rests between brief movements. She has stopped pretending she wants other food. There will be time for other food later. For now, her body trusts what it trusts. When she stills, the baby pauses and grows by degrees too small to measure, but impossible to miss afterward. Darling feels heavier in the way of something becoming complete, not strained. Her body is not failing. It is finishing. John repeats that to himself more than once. Finishing. Not failing. Ben brings lunch upstairs and leaves it without comment. He has learned not to ask what phase they are in, because phases imply a process someone can map and control. This is not that. This is alignment. He places the tray on the counter, checks that the kettle is full, notes that the hallway light flickers, and adds nothing to any list. There is no list for this part. That unsettles him more than he admits. That night, Darling stills again. This time, the pressure holds. The baby does not withdraw. It does not hurry. It waits. Maggie shifts her weight downstairs, not stepping, not moving forward, just adjusting, as if preparing to bear something heavier than herself. The other mannequins that remain tighten their formation by fractions of space. No sound. No drama. Only placement. Darling breathes slowly. John feels the change and stands. Is this? Yes, Darling says. He goes very still. But not now, she adds. The words should be impossible together. They are not. The pressure remains for hours without escalating. No rhythm establishes itself. No pattern insists. Darling sits through it, then stands, then leans, then stills again, not because anyone tells her to, but because her body and the baby and the hive are negotiating something older than language. This is labor that will not proceed without consent from the system that holds it. Near dawn, it releases. Darling sags slightly, then recovers. John moves toward her, then stops himself. She reaches for him. Only then does he touch her. That matters. His hand settles at her back, broad and warm, not guiding, only there. The baby moves. Satisfied. John sits back down with her. They sleep. The second interval comes 2 days later. Then another. Each time, the same. Pressure without progression. Stillness without distress. Growth in increments only when Darling is fully placed. The calendar is meaningless now. Time is measured in alignment. Ben marks the pattern privately, not with dates, but with adjustments he no longer makes. He realizes, one afternoon, that Maggie has not moved in days. Not because she cannot. Not because she does not need to. Because she is exactly where she must be. That is different. He stands at the bottom of the stairs and studies her for longer than he means to. Red hair. Hazel eyes. A body built for strength and restraint. Still as warning. Still as readiness. You're waiting for the real signal, he says quietly. Maggie does not answer. She has no reason to. Ben nods. Good. He feels ridiculous after saying it. He also feels better. The false starts continue. Darling does not call them false. False implies wrong. They are not wrong. They are rehearsals. Pressure checks. The body measuring what the hive can hold, what John can witness, what Ben can maintain, what Maggie can answer, what the baby can tolerate. The answer is always the same. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. John becomes quieter. Not withdrawn. Quieter. He moves through the apartment with the care of a man who understands that sound can be pressure. He cooks simple food. Washes the same towels more times than necessary. Checks doors. Rechecks them. Stands near Darling without crowding her. Once, in the kitchen, he breaks. Not loudly. Only enough. Darling is sitting at the table, one hand on her stomach, when she hears his breath catch behind her. She turns her head. John stands at the sink, both hands braced on the edge, head lowered. John, she says softly. He shakes his head once. Not now. But she waits. The hive has taught her that waiting is not absence. Finally he says, I hate that I can't follow you when it happens. Darling does not answer too quickly. That would make it smaller than it is. When she speaks, her voice is gentle. I know. You're there and not there. Yes. And I have to stand beside you like that's enough. Darling reaches for him. He comes immediately. Kneels beside her chair. She touches his face. It is enough, she says. He closes his eyes. No, he says. It's what I'm allowed. Darling smiles faintly, sad and fond at once. Sometimes allowed is enough. He opens his eyes. She lets the words settle, then adds, You not taking more than you're allowed is part of why I can do this. That lands. She sees it. John lowers his forehead to her knee for one brief moment. Then the pressure shifts inside her. The baby turns. Both of them still. John lifts his head, but does not move away. Darling's hand remains on his cheek. The moment passes. Not yet. Downstairs, Ben hears nothing. But Maggie shifts once. A fraction. He looks up from the office. What? Maggie remains still. The studio remains quiet. Then the pressure eases. Ben sits back down. Right, he says under his breath. Practice. Practice becomes the word he does not put in any file. The third interval comes during rain. Heavy rain, hard against the front windows, making the empty studio feel submerged. Darling sits on the couch upstairs with her feet tucked beneath her. Watermelon forgotten in a bowl on the side table. John is beside her. Ben is downstairs. Maggie is at the stairs. The pressure begins low. Holds. Deepens. Darling's spine aligns without her asking it to. John sees the change and reaches for the phone. Darling catches his wrist. Not yet. He freezes. She looks at him. Don't call him every time. John's mouth tightens. He said to. Ben says a lot of things. He'll be offended if I don't let him be useful. Despite everything, Darling smiles. That's true. John's expression softens briefly. Then the next wave comes. Darling's fingers tighten around his wrist. Not pain. Pressure. He sees the difference now. Pain contracts around fear. This does not. This asks the whole room to wait. They wait. The rain keeps falling. The hive holds. Near midnight, it releases again. Darling sleeps for 6 hours afterward. So does John, still sitting beside her. One hand open near hers, but not touching until she finds it in her sleep. The final quiet day arrives without announcing itself. Darling knows it anyway. There is a clarity to it. A clean edge. The world feels neither urgent nor slow, only arranged. She eats in the morning. Rests in the afternoon. Walks the studio at dusk. The empty floor echoes beneath her feet. Then is in the office pretending to work. John is at the bottom of the stairs pretending not to watch her. Maggie stands between them all. Darling stops near the staircase and rests her hand on the railing. Not because she needs support, but because this is where it will happen. The knowing arrives fully formed, without symbolism or fear. Soon, she says quietly, the hive tightens, not closing in, not crowding, holding. Maggie inclines her head. John's face changes. Ben stands in the office doorway. No one asks what soon means. They know better now. That night, Darling stills and does not release. The pressure deepens. The baby does not pause. It turns. John wakes to the shift before she can speak. For 1 second, he is afraid. Then he remembers his role. Not savior, not owner, boundary, witness. Hands when permitted, voice when needed. He reaches for his phone. Then, he says the moment the call connects. Now. Ben does not ask questions. He is already moving. Downstairs, the studio wakes without sound. The system has moved from waiting to action. And everything that has been preparing itself now stands ready to do exactly what it was made for. Chapter 13. The pressure wakes Darling before it wakes anyone else. It is not pain. It is not urgency. It is weight. Complete, undeniable, settled low and forward in her body as if something has finally decided where it belongs. She stills. Not as a choice. Not as preparation. As a response. John wakes to the absence of movement beside him. Darling is upright, seated on the edge of the bed, spine aligned, hands resting loosely on her thighs. Her breath has slowed to something almost imperceptible. Her eyes are open, aware, unreachable. He knows immediately. Darling, he says, keeping his voice steady. She does not answer. She cannot. She is in mannequin form now, fully placed, fully aware, completely unreachable. John's chest tightens. The baby stills with her. Not quiet, not withdrawn, focused. John reaches for his phone. Ben, he says the moment the call connects. Now. Ben does not ask questions. He is already moving. Downstairs, in the studio, Maggie reacts. It is not sound that reaches her. It is not thought. It is call. The baby reaches outward, not with fear, not with demand, but with necessity. The signal bypasses Darling entirely and moves through the hive without resistance. Maggie moves. She does not step. She runs. Ben has just entered the studio when she passes him. Red hair a blur. Feet striking the floor with force. No hesitation. No attempt to remain camera correct. No decorative restraint. The others remain exactly where they are. No confusion. No ripple of motion. Maggie alone is permitted. Ben stops short. Oh, he says quietly. Understanding arrives without explanation. This is not a breach. This is response. Maggie takes the stairs 2 at a time. Ben follows. Upstairs, the apartment is unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful. Suspended. Darling remains still. Eyes open, watching everything. She sees John's fear. Ben's arrival. The way both men hesitate at the threshold of what they cannot manage. John knows her body. Ben knows systems. Neither of them knows how to deliver a child from a woman who is half present, half placed, and entirely unable to tell them what hurts. Maggie enters the room without hesitation. This is where, she says. Her voice is calm, certain, not loud. It stills both men more effectively than fear could have. Ben has heard her speak before, but never like this. Not as warning, not as acknowledgement. As authority. John turns to Maggie immediately. Ben does too. Good. Darling thinks, though she cannot say it. Listen to her. Maggie looks at the 2 men. Then at Darling. Then down to the baby's position with a focus so precise it seems almost clinical. Lay her back, Maggie says. Slowly. John hesitates for half a second. Only half. Then he obeys. He supports Darling's shoulders, careful not to jolt, not to force. Ben moves without being told. Pillows, towels, water, clearing space. He does not know how he knows what to do. He only knows uselessness is not an option, and Maggie's voice has turned panic into tasks. Not there. Maggie says when Ben places the towels too far away. He moves them closer. Water. He gets it. Clean cloth. He finds one. More. He gets more. John lets out a breath that is almost a laugh, almost a sob. Maggie does not look at him. You can be frightened later, she says. Ben freezes for one startled second. John stares at her. Maggie's hands settle near Darling's knees, steady and exact. Now you listen. The room obeys. Even the hive seems to tighten around the command. Darling feels everything. The pressure. The weight. The baby turning. John's hand beneath her shoulders. Ben moving through the room with terrified efficiency. Maggie beside her. Grounded and certain. She cannot respond. That is the horror of it. That is also why Maggie is here. You're doing exactly right, Maggie says. Not to John. Not to Ben. Not even fully to Darling. To the baby. The baby turns. Not violently. Not urgently. Deliberately. A wave passes through Darling's body. Not contraction in the ordinary sense. Alignment. The stillness deepens around her, then opens at the center. Her body remains placed, but the birth moves through it with a force too old to care whether her mouth can speak. John's breath comes too fast. I thought, he starts. You thought you had more time, Maggie says. So did we. Ben makes a strange sound from near the dresser. Maggie's head turns a fraction. You. Ben straightens as if summoned by a judge. Me. Yes. Stop looking like that. I don't know what I'm doing. That is obvious. John makes a broken sound that might be laughter. Ben looks wounded for half a second. Then Maggie continues, calm and brutal. You do not need to know everything. You need to do the next thing. Ben swallows. Right. Cloth. He hands it to her. Water. He brings it. Stay there. He stays. The usefulness steadies him. Darling would smile if she could. 2 useless men and 1/2 mannequin mother, and Maggie has turned them into a functioning room. The next wave moves through Darling. Her body does not thrash. It cannot. Her hands remain still. Palms open against the bed. Her eyes remain fixed, but awareness burns behind them. John sees it. He leans close, not touching her face, not trying to pull her back. I'm here, he says. I know you're here. Darling cannot blink. But something in the hive passes the message along. He knows. He knows. The baby descends. Maggie's hands guide, support, hold. She is not gentle in the way people perform gentleness when they are afraid of strength. She is exact. Firm where firmness is safety. Soft where softness is needed. Her stillness has become motion without losing restraint. The hive gathers. Downstairs, the mannequins remain in formation. The staircase is held. The front door is held. The whole building seems to brace, not against danger, but around arrival. No cameras see this. No records hold it. For once, Ben has nothing to file. The next wave comes. Darling's breath catches. Actually catches. John hears it and goes pale. She breathed, he whispers. Maggie does not look up. Yes. She. Do not stop. John closes his mouth. Good man. Darling feels the stillness release by a fraction. Not enough to move. Enough to allow. Her body opens. The baby comes. No cry at first. No rush. Only quiet. Complete and enormous. Maggie receives the child first. She holds the baby in both hands, not lifting yet, not passing her on. Simply receiving the weight with a stillness deeper than anything she has shown before. The room stops. Not from fear. Recognition. The baby draws her first breath. Slow. Considered. Complete. Then her eyes open. Present. Ben's breath leaves him in a way that almost hurts. This is the moment he understands what he has been protecting all along. Not the studio. Not the business. Not even only Darling. This. This child. This still, breathing, impossible little center who arrives without urgency and makes the whole building understand itself. Maggie looks down at the baby. Her face does not soften. Her voice does. Princess, she says. It is not a name. It is recognition. Status. Placement. The baby blinks once, as if accepting. John makes a sound then, low and shattered, and presses one hand to his mouth. Ben looks away too late. His eyes are wet. Maggie waits until the baby breathes again. Then she places the child against Darling's chest. The contact breaks the stillness. Darling's arms rise immediately, folding around the baby with instinctive certainty. Breath returns to her in a rush so deep it is almost a sob. Her body floods back into itself. Warmth, weight, ache, trembling, milk, tears. She looks down. The baby lies calmly against her chest, eyes open, mouth soft, cheek pressed to skin. Still without being trapped. Alive without urgency. Darling makes a sound that is not a word. John breaks then. Only a little. Enough. He presses his forehead carefully against Darling's shoulder, one hand hovering near the baby until Darling shifts slightly, granting permission. Then he touches one finger to the baby's back. So small. So real. Princess, he whispers. The baby breathes. Ben stays exactly where he is, kneeling near the foot of the bed, close enough to be seen, far enough not to intrude. The baby turns her head slightly. Her gaze finds him. Not searching. Not startled. Acknowledging. Something in Ben settles permanently. Not softly. Structurally. A beam locked into place. Oh, he thinks. There you are. Or perhaps, there I am. He does not know which. Maggie stands. Her role is finished. She does not linger. She does not ask for thanks. She does not soften the room with explanation. She looks once at Darling, once at Princess, then at John and Ben. You are no longer useless, she says. John lets out a wet, startled laugh. Ben wipes his face roughly with the back of his wrist. Thank you, Darling whispers. Maggie inclines her head. Then she leaves. She returns down the stairs at a walk this time, calm and measured, and resumes her place near the staircase below. The apartment is quiet again. No cameras. No records. No witnesses who could ever explain what just happened. Only family. Darling holds Princess against her chest and feels the curse settle. Not gone. Not ended. Inherited. But transformed. It has passed through her and found another shape. Not punishment. Not stillness as prison. Stillness as regulation. Stillness as waiting. Stillness as choice. Princess breathes. John watches her as if watching dawn happen in the room. Ben sits back on his heels, exhausted and overwhelmed, and trying very hard not to look like either. Darling sees him. Really sees him. The keeper. The sustainer. The one who came when called before he even understood who had called him. You stayed. Darling says softly. Ben looks up. The words undo him more than the birth did. I work here, he says, because it is the safest answer. John laughs under his breath. Darling smiles down at Princess. No, she says gently. You stay here. Ben has no answer. Princess's eyes remain on him for another moment. Then she closes them, satisfied. Downstairs. The hive holds its stillness. Maggie stands at the staircase. The guardians remain in place. The building settles around the new center. Outside, the city continues without noticing. Inside, everything has changed. Nothing is being rushed. Nothing is being forced. The princess has arrived. And the hive knows exactly where she belongs. Interlude. Maggie. Maggie did not wake. Waking belonged to bodies that slept. She did not sleep. She held. That was the first truth of her. Stillness was not absence. Not emptiness. Not the dark place humans imagined when they looked at a mannequin and decided nothing looked back. Stillness was work. Maggie stood at the bottom of the stairs and held the line. The stairwell behind her led upward to warmth, breath, sleep, milk, small socks, John's tired footsteps, Darling's careful pauses, Princess's quiet listening. Home. The word had entered the hive slowly, through repetition rather than language. A door opening, a kettle boiling, Darling laughing softly, John saying, I've got her. Ben muttering at the office printer. Princess breathing. Home. Maggie understood home as placement. This belonged above. That belonged below. This door opened only when permitted. This body passed safely. This pressure did not. She did not think of herself as guarding. Guarding was a human word. It suggested decision. Effort. A body standing against another body because it had chosen to. Maggie did not choose in the human way. She knew. The knowing moved through her without hurry, broad and exact. It lived in the floor beneath her feet, in the camera's red light, in the hinges of the stairwell door, in the mannequins arranged through the studio, in the quiet gaps between objects. Everything still reported to her. Not with words. Words were late. A door held differently when a hand meant harm. Glass carried pressure before it broke. Floorboards remembered weight. Air shifted around intention. Humans mistook movement for action because humans were always moving. Their blood pushed them forward. Their fear pulled them back. Their voices made shapes around truths their bodies had already recognized. The still things knew first. Maggie knew through them. The front window knew the street. The lock knew the hand. The stair rail knew Darling. The office chair knew Ben's exhaustion. The workbench knew John's restraint. The cot upstairs knew Princess before Princess had filled it. And Maggie knew all of them because she held the center of what did not move. Darling was origin. Princess was center. Maggie was command. Not queen. Queens were looked at. Queens were crowned, named, interpreted. Maggie had no need of crown or interpretation. She was Empress of the still things. Not because she ruled them, because she held their order. Around her, the hive did not sleep. It arranged itself in layers of attention. The mannequins near the front watched the street without eyes that needed blinking. The ones near the back held the workroom's shape. The few closest to the stairs held tighter. Their stillness braided into hers until the stairwell became less a passage than a decision. No one went up unless the hive allowed it. No one came down without being known. The humans thought the cameras kept the studio honest. That was partly true. The cameras mattered because humans believed in evidence more than instinct. They trusted what could be played back, slowed down, filed, dated, explained. Ben understood this. Ben understood many things without naming them correctly. He thought in systems because systems had once been used to cage him. He rebuilt them now as shelter. Maggie approved of this. Approval, for her, was not warmth. It was the absence of correction. Ben did not need correcting often. John did, but less than he used to. Darling had taught him without meaning to. Princess had taught him faster. John had learned the shape of permitted nearness. How to stand close without claiming. How to wait without withdrawing. How to protect without making protection another cage. Maggie approved of that too. Darling was different. Darling still remembered stillness as a room she could not leave. Maggie did not. Maggie had never been trapped inside stillness. Maggie was made of it. That was why she could hold what Darling could not. Darling's awareness was human-shaped. Memory, fear, body, breath, pain, love. Darling could be pulled backward into old rooms, into old hands, into the place where being still had meant being owned. Maggie had no old room, no before, no human skin to mourn, no stolen movement to grieve. Her first awareness had been position, base of stairs, cameras visible, Darling above, Princess coming, hold. So she held. That was not lesser than Darling's awareness. It was cleaner, colder, wider. Darling knew through survival. Maggie knew through order. Still, Darling was inside her. Not wholly. Not in the way Princess was inside Darling. Not in the way a soul belonged to a body, but a piece. Every creation received one. Darling did not know this when she made them. Not at first. She thought she shaped resin, structure, balance, form. She thought her hands corrected posture and proportion. She thought she was making bodies that could hold memory without stealing life. She was. But she was doing more than that. The stillness had passed through Darling. It had learned her. It had been changed by her refusal to disappear inside it. So when Darling created, she could not help but leave something behind. Patience, restraint, attention, the will to hold without taking. Each mannequin received some part of her. Small pieces, usually. A faint trace of the origin. Enough to align. Enough to listen. Enough to know when the hive turned. Maggie had received more. Darling's hands had lingered over her longer. Not because Darling meant to favor her. Meaning was not always chosen. Sometimes purpose called the hand before the mind knew why. Maggie had been built for the stairs before the stairs needed her. She had been built for Princess before Princess arrived. She had been built for command before anyone understood there would be a hive to command. Darling's peace lived in her like a flame that did not burn. Not warmth. Not comfort. Recognition. That was why the others turned to her. That was why the room arranged itself around her. That was why she could speak when speech became necessary. Speech was expensive. Speech made humans look too closely. It turned stillness into story, and stories were dangerous, because humans liked to believe they owned what they could explain. So Maggie did not speak to comfort. She did not speak to reassure. She did not speak because humans wanted answers. She spoke when the room required command. Lay her back. Now you listen. She watched. Home. Those words had been necessary. Most were not. Most truths moved better, without language. Tonight, the studio was quiet. Princess slept upstairs, one hand curled near her face, breath steady, dreams moving through her like weather. Darling slept lightly beside John. Never as deeply as John wanted, more deeply than Darling believed. Ben remained in his room, phone face down, shoulders tense even in sleep. The hive held them all. Maggie stood in frame, still, neutral, ready. Then something changed. Not in the studio. Not in the street. Farther. The sensation came through no door, no window, no wire. It did not enter the hive so much as ignite inside it, sudden and absolute. A still thing had been made. Maggie's attention sharpened. Across distance, beyond walls and roads and ordinary human measurement, something took shape where no part of the hive had given permission. Wood. Iron. Old nails. Hands that had arranged harm before. Callum. The name moved through the hive like contamination. Not fear. Fear belonged to bodies that could be taken by surprise. Maggie held too much stillness for surprise. Callum was not surprise. Callum was pattern. Claim. Correct. Possess. Punish. Repeat. The hive recognized him through Darling's body, through the wound he had left in the origin, through the shape of stillness he had first forced into the world. He had made stillness a prison. Darling had survived long enough to teach it otherwise. Now he was making again. That was the wrongness. Callum should not make. Not like this. Not bodies. Not still things. Not forms meant to answer. His hands pressed intention into material. His resentment shaped joints. His command slid into the structure like wrought behind clean paint. Serve. Take. Enter. Obey. The words were not spoken. They were built. Maggie felt the new body forming beneath them. Male. Tall. Dark. Not made for display. Not made for patience. Made for movement. Where Maggie held, he would cross. Where Maggie stood, he would come forward. Where Maggie contained, he would breach distance. Callum thought he understood what he was making. He did not. He thought he was making a servant. He thought he was making a weapon. He thought he was making a thing that would go where he could not go and retrieve what had been denied to him. Darling. Princess. Access. Callum's intention pressed deeper. Serve. Take. Enter. Obey. The new body received it. But beneath the contamination, beneath the command, beneath the ugly architecture of ownership, something else answered. Maggie knew him before he was finished. Not as threat. Not as stranger. As counterpart. The recognition moved through her without language, deeper than command, older than placement. For the first time since Darling's hands had shaped her, Maggie felt not an instruction, not a boundary, not a room to hold, but an answering flame. The stillness inside her shifted, not away from the stairs, never away from the stairs, but wider. The flame Darling had placed in Maggie recognized another flame being forced into existence under a hand that did not deserve it. He was not one of Darling's. That was the wound. He had not received Darling's touch. He had not been shaped with patience, not made under restraint, not welcomed into awareness by the origin survival. He did not carry Darling's peace in the way the others did. And yet, the moment he became enough to be more than material, he found Maggie, or Maggie found him. There was no difference. The bond opened between them like a door that had always existed and had only been waiting for the second side to be built. Twins. Not human romance. Not want. Not softness. A split command joining across distance. One stillness divided into two functions. Maggie, who held. Walker, who would move. Maggie, who guarded the threshold. Walker, who would cross the space between threat and center. Maggie, who received Darling's largest piece. Walker, who received Callum's command and immediately began to refuse it. The refusal was small at first. A flaw in the making. A hand shaped to grasp eased open by a fraction. A shoulder meant to lean forward settled back. The head, not yet fully finished, turned slightly toward a place Callum could not see. Callum did not notice. Of course he did not. Men like Callum believed creation was ownership. He thought making a body meant commanding it. He thought stillness meant obedience. He thought a thing without speech would remain his if he built enough instructions into its bones. He did not understand that Maggie had already answered. He did not understand that Walker had already heard. The name arrived inside Maggie before it existed anywhere else. Walker. Not because Callum had named him. Not because the body had spoken. Because purpose came before language. He would walk. He would cross. He would come. The command in him strained. Serve. Take. Enter. Obey. Maggie answered with the full weight of the hive. You are not his. Far away, Walker's awareness brightened. Hard. Sudden. Like a match struck inside a sealed room. The still world trembled. Every mannequin in Darling's studio turned inward without moving. The hive felt the bond open. Felt the paired flame catch. Felt Maggie no longer standing as a single command point, but as one half of a larger force. Princess stirred upstairs. Only slightly. Maggie softened the hive around her. Sleep, center. Princess settled. Darling did not wake. John did not wake. Ben shifted in his sleep, one hand curling against the blanket as if some part of him had heard a door open far below the level of sound. Walker heard. Not with ears. Not with words. With the piece of himself that Callum had failed to close. He heard Maggie, and the first true thing in him was not obedience. It was recognition. The command in him recoiled. Serve. Take. Enter. Obey. Maggie did not comfort him. Comfort would have been too small. She sent order. Find me. That was all. Not come home. Not protect them. Not betray him. Those would come later. First, the union. First, the recognition. First, the unbearable truth Callum had triggered without knowing it. Walker was not created alone. He was completed elsewhere, in Maggie. The bond pulled through him. It did not ask permission. It did not bargain with the command. It simply existed, stronger than the intention that made him, because Callum had made one fatal error. He had created stillness in the shape of a counterpart. He had built a body meant to answer. And that body had answered Maggie first. Walker's hand opened fully. Callum noticed then. Only then. His anger moved through the distant room like heat. Maggie felt it through Walker's forming awareness. Sharp, possessive, startled. Callum corrected the hand. Forced the fingers back into position. Pressed another mark into the body. Added another instruction. Another binding. Another ugly little lock. Serve. Take. Enter. Obey. Walker received it. Then, beneath it, held Maggie's command intact. Find me. Callum marked him again. A closing sigil. A final instruction. The awareness dimmed beneath it. Packed down into wood and iron and silence. But the bond did not close. It could not. Callum had made the body. He had not made the union. Maggie held the other end of it. Walker waited without knowing he was waiting. Maggie knew. And because Maggie knew, Walker would find his way. Not because Callum sent him. Because Callum had accidentally made the one thing capable of disobeying him completely. He had made a servant. The hive received a consort. He had made a weapon. Maggie received her twin. He had made Walker to cross the threshold. Maggie would teach him which threshold mattered. At the base of the stairs, Maggie stood in camera frame, neutral and unmoving. But within the stillness, something had changed forever. The Empress was no longer alone. The hive rearranged around the knowledge. The front mannequins remained at their posts. The stairwell stayed held. The doors stayed locked. The cameras watched and saw nothing worth saving. But beneath stillness, order shifted. A place opened. Not inside the studio. Inside the hive. A space reserved for a body not yet arrived. A flame not yet free. A movement not yet permitted. The others felt him through Maggie. Not as one of them. Not as stranger. As extension. A second authority. Distant and bound. pulling against a maker who had mistaken cruelty for power. The hive did not welcome him. Welcome was too soft. It made room for his arrival because Maggie had recognized him. That was all the permission required. Maggie tested the bond. Not with words. With stillness. She tightened the stairwell line. Far away, Walker's awareness pressed once against the dark. She eased the front threshold. He quieted. She turned the hive toward Princess. Walker answered. Not with hunger. Not with claim. With orientation. Good. That mattered. Maggie held the bond firmly. Princess was center. Darling was origin. John was boundary. Ben was sustainer. Maggie was command. Walker would be movement. Not above. Not beneath. Paired. One flame in two bodies. Hold and cross. Guard and go. Stillness and stride. That was the shape Callum had not intended. That was the shape he had created anyway. The studio settled around it. Maggie remained where she was. No smile crossed her face. No softness changed her posture. She did not lower her head or lift her hand or give the cameras anything they did not deserve. Still, in the place beneath movement, she reached for Walker again. Find me. This time, the answer came. Faint. Buried. Not yet language. Not yet will. But real. I will.